thing on our agenda is an executive session. Do we need that executive session?
So the lawyers actually will not be joining us tonight, so I'm happy to move that to the end.
Okay.
We can take that out of order.
So we don't need to close the doors, we can keep everything open. Alrighty, so our next first item of business is the continued public hearing for the preliminary subdivision application at 0 Annette Lane.
You want me to give my little spiel?
Oh, yes, I do, thank you, I'm
No
just
worries.
moving right in there. First,
Love
you're
it.
just gonna give a spiel.
So thank you all for joining us tonight for the Cpdc hearing of April 10th, 2023. I'm Andrew McNichol, the Community Development Director. This is Mary Benedetto, our new senior planner next to me. On the board in person, we have Chair Heather Klisch, John Weston, Mark Wetzel, Tony DiRezzo, and joining us through Zoom is Pamela Adrian. So we will need to do roll call votes on if any votes tonight. So this meeting is run in a hybrid style, allowing both in-person and remote participation. We will stick to our similar format in that the applicant will present their presentation and application to the board. The board will comment and question amongst themselves and then open to public hearing. If you are acknowledged during the public comment, please raise your hand. The chair will acknowledge you. Please come up, introduce yourself, name and address for the record. And for those on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature found under reactions, or if you have your camera on, simply raise your hand. And I'll let the chair know that we have some Zoom comments as well. So the chat is open to host and co-host, myself and Mary, but we do ask you try to limit it to really technical assistance only and not public comment if you can help it. And the last thing I can add is that this meeting is being recorded and broadcasted by RCTV on the local channels. And from there, I think I'm good.
Andrew, are there any changes to the meeting setup as per the issues we had last time?
So screen sharing is limited to host and co-host, which again right now is Mary and I. If there is an applicant online that wishes to screen share, they can either forward it to me or request permission to do so, which we can grant. We did in this turn ask that participants on the Zoom at this point in time cannot unmute themselves by themselves just yet. They have to request permission or use the raise hand feature, and we'll ask them to unmute. So just a little control stopgap for now. We hope it goes well here tonight. But if it ends up being too clunky, we can revert back to what was our normal.
That sounds like you've tightened things up.
So.
Okay, awesome. So for now, we can move ahead to
Yes.
the continued public hearing for 0 Annette Lane. Is there somebody here to present on that?
My name is Andrew Pandolf with Vineyard Engineering, 17 Salem Street in Massachusetts. We're the survey engineers on the project. So at the last meeting, we introduced a one-lot subdivision for construction of a 28 by 60 foot single-family home at 0 Annette Lane. At the previous meeting, the board indicated that we should, kind of revise our waiver list. So we submitted a revised requested waiver list. Specifically, we removed waiver requests regarding topo within 100 feet of the lot, test borings within the 30-foot extension of the paved layout of Annette Lane and the proposed driveway, and we removed waiver requests regarding installation of bituminous concrete sidewalks and vertical granite curving. So these items will be included in a future definitive subdivision submittal. We also submitted an alternate proof of concept. The board requested they'd like to see a proof of concept plan showing a 60-foot radius cul-de-sac. Andrew, is it possible to pull that one?
Yep.
Thank you. Yep. Our previous proof of concept plan showed a elevated roadway which would have connected Annette Lane to Applegate Lane. And this configuration was showing a 60-foot radius cul-de-sac. The house would be accessed by a driveway coming off of the cul-de-sac. So as far as design implications go, this this configuration would create a slightly smaller lot that the house would be constructed on by about 1,500 square feet. But it would still do what we needed to do in that it would create the necessary frontage on Annette Lane, and it would also allow the lot to conform to all other zoning requirements for an S20 zone.
Can I interject here just to make sure that we're clear, because I think even, there's some misunderstanding even, on from the town, right? We request this, you provide it. This doesn't mean that anyone plans on building this. In fact, you probably couldn't build it because of wetland regulations. You don't need to say that, yes or no, and we can't take that into account. We just need to we need to see that it is physically possible for this configuration to be on a plan, and that it meets all the dimensions.
Correct.
I'm going to say check. We push this to the side. We don't necessarily, I'm going to say, want to or have to have an additional conversation about this, because everyone sort of knows that this is not what the proposal is. We just need to verify that it can fit on the land as planned. So I just wanted to make sure that people sort of understood that, and we don't spend time confusing people.
Gotcha. All right, so I'm happy to jump to our next plan, if that's good. So we also did some revisions to our preliminary subdivision plan based on kind of some of the comments that we had received at the last meeting. So we're still proposing, extending the paper layout of Annette Lane through to Applegate Lane, but all we would construct is a 30-foot extension of the existing paved layout of Annette Lane in order to access a 19-foot wide driveway that would lead up to the house. So some other changes that we made to this revised plan include construction of a 4-foot wide by 142-foot long boardwalk for public use between the end of Annette Lane and the end of Applegate Lane. So this boardwalk, which is shown at the bottom of the plan, it's kind of those two dark lines that are close together. It would span from the edges of the 35-foot buffer zones of the wetland area. This allows for pedestrian traffic between Applegate Lane and Annette Lane, these two subdivisions that aren't connected. And it allows for pedestrian traffic without causing disturbance to the wetland by foot traffic, which I guess has kind of been an issue. People walking through the wetland area. So this would get people up and off the wetland area, preserve that, and connect the two as sort of a public benefit. We're also showing proposed snow storage at the end of the paved extension, sort of to the right and left, or above and below as you're looking at this plan of the paved extension. So this would be where snowplow could push snow during a snowstorm. We're also showing snow treatment, pre-treatment areas that are kind of the hatched areas. So what this would allow is snow melt would kind of be filtered through before it kind of filters down into the wetland. Typical pre-treatment areas consist of vegetated and/or stone swales that can catch some of the suspended solids that might be in the snow from like road salt and things like that. The final design of these pre-treatment areas will be based on input from the Reading Conservation Commission. And I think the last thing I'd like to mention, it's important to note that the proposed driveway that we have here was previously approved by the Reading Fire Department at our DRT meeting. The proposed driveway would be 19 feet wide. It would be constructed to hold a minimum of 64,000 pounds, and it would be wide enough to accommodate a fire engine and ambulance side by side in the event of an emergency. So that's all I had. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions from the commission?
After you, please.
On the extension, I went out and looked at the site, and it does drop off a little bit at the end of the road. Is there planning to be any fill there, or additional drainage at the end?
So yeah, a full drainage study will be performed as part of a definitive plan, and likely there would have to be a little bit of fill brought in to kind of make that less steep of a grade. Those final grading plans and stormwater management plans are in process, and they'll be included as part of the definitive application. But any grading that's done out here will be done in such a way that, you know, there's no water running off-site and impacting neighbors.
Okay. And Tony, did you have a question also?
I was just wondering what the two parallel lines running from the lot to the extension are. Yes, those two.
Sewer and water services. So they would connect to existing sewer and water mains that are located through that wetland area. So that's how we would connect our utilities, and we'd do it in such a way to try and keep it out of the wetland buffer area as best we could.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions. Do you have any questions? Pam, do you have any questions?
No, I have none.
Okay. At this point, we'll see if there are questions from the participants here. Yes, and so please come on up and tell us your name, and there's a little orange piece of tape that says stand here, and we ask you to stand there so that the people on Zoom can see you.
Okay, my name is Robert Judge. I live at 10 Annette Lane, which is really adjacent to this other property. Now, I'm sorry that I don't hear that well. My biggest concerns, I'll tell you right now, is the extension of 10 Annette, of Annette Lane. And my biggest concerns are where I live, where I'm right next to it, I got some other issues. But when they're talking going 30 feet, I think straight forward, obviously when you go 30 feet straight forward, you got shoulders of the road, you've got taper and all that, so you're probably, I don't know, 50 feet straight forward. And I know that you said some other things, I'm sorry that I typically follow, but are you telling still that you're gonna go 30 feet further in on Annette Lane?
We would, can I step up here?
Yes, please.
Sure. So we would extend the existing width of pavement 30 feet this way.
Yeah.
And per the town's subdivision regulations, they request that we build sidewalks on either side. So
Yeah.
this would be a 50-foot layout, so you have to be occupied by sidewalk, this paved extension,
Yeah.
and curbing and sidewalks.
So if it's 30 feet, what do you think your dimension will be going across? In other words, will you be, say, 55, 30, and you're gonna have sidewalks and all that? You're gonna be probably over 10 on either side, I'm guessing.
We'd keep it within this 50-foot layout.
Okay, the 50-foot layout.
Yep.
Okay.
So this, and that lane is currently 50 feet.
Yeah,
The subdivision regs asked for a 60-foot wide layout.
Yeah.
We requested a waiver to bring it back down to 50 to match the existing layout of that lane. So yeah, it would fit within that 50-foot wide. I can't say if it's exactly 50
Okay.
feet, but it would be 50 feet or less.
so at this point here,
Mhm.
you're gonna be, are you gonna be level, or are you gonna taper down?
Well, the final site grading design is still in process. That'll be submitted as part of a definitive application. But you can kind of see here, it's a little difficult to read, but this is 98. From here to here is a 2-foot drop, right? From this line to this line, this contour line.
Which where is that?
See this contour line that runs up here?
Yeah,
And this one right here, there's 2 feet there's a 2-foot grade change from there to there, right? So here, it's a little bit tighter, right? So this is 2 feet,
Yeah.
this is 2 feet. So we might have to raise it up just a little bit, but, we're gonna kind of work with the grade as it is.
to be honest, and I'm not an engineer, I'm just a homeowner. But when I'm looking at some things, I see it more than 2 feet when you get to a certain point. Because, okay, now, where's your cul-de-sac gonna be just from the, you said,
So we're not, just to, as this gentleman said, we're not constructing the cul-de-sac. We don't
Okay.
want to construct the
fine, I
cul-de-sac.
couldn't hear what you said.
Sure, understood.
Yeah, but I could see that you don't have room for it anyways, that's what I can see.
Well, it fits based on paper, but we don't want to construct
Yeah.
that. It would be
Yeah.
just too much disturbance to the area, unnecessary for a single family home, and it would leave you with 2 cul-de-sacs that don't connect. So we don't want to
That's,
build
okay,
this.
so that's fine. But see, this is my concern. I think like, my house is right next to it, okay? But we have, and if you go, and I can see that you're actually, as far as the net, you're actually gonna turn it slightly and all that. But 30 feet across, and I'm just gonna say a number, you're gonna, either side, you're gonna have 10 feet. I assume that'll cover your tape, you probably have some type of tapered land also. So when I'm looking from my window, and my land is all low in here, My land is about the same height as all this stuff back here, okay? So when I look out the window, I see, just looks all the same, okay? But right up close here, my land actually drops off about 3 feet right away. I really don't want to be looking at something built up. I'm not thrilled about having my yard, looking at my yard, which I've had forever, and as you do this, I don't know if you have the property lines here exact and all that, but I see you possibly on my property.
Well,
So while we had this conversation, could I ask you to come back over here so
Okay.
folks can see you at home?
But on that angle, and see, on that angle, you could very well be on my property.
So we're licensed surveyors in Massachusetts, and we did an on-the-ground instrument survey. So it's our job to make sure that we're not on your property.
Well,
So
if you're not, you're just missing, okay? And you're probably, and I'm not a professional, but I'm concerned about looking out my window, and I have all this level of land, for a big area, I've got a level of land, and then I'm looking over here, and all of a sudden, and as you go further back, whatever, but as I look there, I see a raised road. I would say at least 3 feet. It could be 4 feet, I don't know. But I'm looking at a raised road, and I think for me, that doesn't look real good. And the raised road isn't like set back some. It's practically, if it's not on my property line, you're probably a foot from it. You're really on top of my property line. That doesn't, I'm not trying, I just don't think that looks good.
So could we maybe, so thank you for this, and thank you for this, and be sure you're talking to us as well, because we're the ones who have to make the decision. Would you like to respond to that in any way? Is the road going to be raised up? Is it, clearly you're going to stay on, he won't be going on your property lines, right? Those are the
I know he
rules.
won't be on my property line, but if he's right off my property line, it's gonna make it's gonna make it.
It's gonna devalue.
well, the existing, if I could just interject, the existing back of sidewalk is on your property line now, right? Because this is U10, right? You're kind of in this general area.
Yeah.
So, the city owns from here up, you own from here down, they have their sidewalk right up to your lines. We'd be doing nothing different except for extending that.
Yeah, well, what I'm talking about is I'm talking when you cross over the border where the sidewalk is, and I don't know for sure if part of the sidewalk is on my land or not, I don't know, okay? But what I do know is my land is awful close to that. When I went out there and I tried to measure 50 feet across, I felt that you were probably very likely on my property line. And then when I walked on the other side to figure out when you were talking cul-de-sacs, all that, but I was still trying to figure 50 feet across. It looked like 50 feet across, you were in an area where your grade is raising a little bit on the other side. Yeah, it's hard to say because let's face it, it's a very lumpy land.
It is.
But the way you're turning the road there, I think you're turning it, my property line does have an angle, and you're turning right along that angle. And again, I'm looking at these things here, and I'm not an expert, but I am a concerned person, and my biggest thing is, I don't like the idea of a road that's gonna probably be with a shoulder and everything else, be 50 feet wide. And when I look out my window, and I've got land and then it drops down, and then I've got like a big area of flat land. And I hate to think I'm looking at flat land, and then I'm looking at your raised road. It almost reminds me, and believe me, I don't want to be offensive or anything, I'm just very concerned, but it almost looks like in my backyard, and then your side too, it's all flat too, it's all level down too. But it looks to me like a platform that's like 50 feet wide by 40 feet out. And I think that detracts from my property.
So let me, thank you very much. I think we've heard the concern. Is there space to do screening, or?
Not if we build sidewalks, which we had requested a waiver for, but or so they wanted sidewalks and curbing, so.
And Andrew has his.
So that's a conversation we'll have when we get to waivers, but
Right.
I did not think your intent was for sidewalks on the 30-foot extension and more just that that extension was built to standards of a road.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong when we get there, but regardless.
I'd like to make one more point if I could. There's wetlands change. I know when I moved there, they came out one time and they started pegging wetlands. I got all this grass I cut and everything, and all of a sudden they're pegging the wetlands that advanced into my yard. Now, it's been a long time since they did that, but I don't know if the wetlands that they show on the map from 1986 are the same as they are now. But I think that when you're putting this in, that can also change the wetlands. That can change funnels. You can have water running down that road. You know,
So for that, this will have to
that's
go,
headed right in the direction of the wetlands.
for that, this will have to go through the Conservation Commission, and those will be things that they'll consider.
And that's how the grade goes now. It runs down into that wetland off of the net now. So we have to, as Cliff just said, we'll have to address that with conservation. We can't make any, we can't harm the wetlands, by doing the work that we're doing. So that's sort of their role. And just to clarify, this wetlands location was based on a delineation done in 2019, filed with the Conservation Commission and accepted. So it's been updated since '86.
Well, I'm telling you all my concerns, but I'm telling you, and I'm looking at all these other things because I worry about the wetlands because I don't want any water in my basement. And that's very important to value my house. But I also, the thing that I don't like more than anything is looking out my land, seeing this flat land, big area, and then all of a sudden I get to the point where there's a road that's raised and it looks like a platform. I really don't like that at all. And I don't know what the plans were years ago, but I never heard anything like that. So I don't want to keep on repeating myself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other comments from the room? Yes, please, come on up.
I gotta come home to my kids in a second. Hi.
Hi.
Stand here.
Yes, please.
So I missed the first one. I didn't read.
And
the
can you
notes.
tell us from this, can you tell
Emily
us?
Fox. My name is Emily Fox. I live at 78, the top right lot.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if you guys talked about this already. I have a couple of questions. The environmental impact report, you're requesting a waiver for that?
Yep.
Is that, and that might be a conservation committee thing too, but it's a swamp, it's a bog. I don't know if you've seen pictures. I know Sheree has submitted pictures, but it's you could throw a body in there. It's a very wet, it's like a lake. And my yard floods every time it rains. The previous owners put in a full French drain system before we moved in, and it goes up, the land behind our houses goes up, and that's where that house is gonna go. And I just it's really hard for me to. I think we need an environmental impact report, and that's one of my bigger concerns is I just don't understand how it could not impact the flooding and the wetlands and swamps.
So, and everybody help me out here. The impacts to the wetlands would definitely be covered by the Conservation Commission that goes through there. I believe we touched on this last time where the environmental report oftentimes gets to impacts to threatened and endangered species and other elements of the environment aside from stormwater and wetlands that are oftentimes used in much larger tracts of land. And I'm not saying how we'd vote on the waiver, but oftentimes I have seen the environmental impact report waiver request on smaller pieces of land like this. Everybody else, please chime in, and Andrew, you may.
Generally, the issues that you're talking about will be handled by the Conservation Commission and the Stormwater Management Report, and looking at that. The environmental report is more of a big picture thing. Do we have, endangered species or areas that we want to preserve? And then that would impact how the subdivision might get laid out. So you may have a subdivision with 4 roads in it and say, well, how about if we eliminate this road over here and move something over here to protect this area. So it's more of a big picture, looking at all the potential issues. But on a small area like this, the Conservation Commission can take that into account as part of their order conditions.
And since I'll just chime in here, since we pretty much, right, understand that the environmental impacts are all related to those wetland types of issues, what we don't want to do is have this board, right, who are, aside from Mark here, right, aren't experts in that, try and interpret that, and then they're gonna have to go to the Conservation Commission and then have them look at it with more expertise and come out with a different decision. We like to have the people who know the expertise sort of focus in on that area.
Do they do like wildlife stuff? Like there's tons of animals back there. Do they look at that, or do you?
Not specifically. I mean, for instance, if it showed that there was, say, a blue-spotted salamander, they may require them to do some sort of a study on that. If there's habitat maps that identify specific types of endangered species, and then you would have to do an additional study for that. But if there's, deer, as in my backyard, deer, coyotes, and wild turkeys going through, they're probably not going to require.
Just because they aren't rare enough.
At all.
And one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm fairly new on this commission, but this is a preliminary plan. So they're going to submit a final plan with more details on drainage and grading and all the physical features that we'll examine also to make sure that it's done the right way, so it's not on people's property and the grading doesn't go onto adjoining properties and things like that. So we'll see a more detailed plan in the future.
Yeah, this is essentially kind of blocking it out and then going to get Conservation Commission input and conditions that they might place on it, right?
To add to that, the level of land here requires a stormwater permit, which adds that much more detail to the stormwater drainage report and design, and Conservation too will be managing that permit and issuing that along with any approvals that they may give here, so.
So that's all to say, the wetland and stormwater impacts are going to be, I imagine, very thoroughly looked at, but not by this body, by the Conservation Commission, which means it's like not so much fun for you because you gotta go to 2 meetings, but it will be taken care, it will be addressed by that group.
Okay, all right. And like the hill, like right where the house is that the next meeting?
How we address how that's gonna remain or need to be altered will be addressed in the definitive site plan application, which would be
And that is one reason we wanted to see all the topographic lines.
right, which we need to add to get 100 feet in every direction, so that we have it all nailed down. That what this is the grade out there, on others' land, and we need to. Our development needs to ensure that we're not going to impact anybody else. So we need to pick up some more information on these abutting properties, and factor all that into our final design that we're going to propose at a definitive subdivision application.
I think I'll be at the next meeting. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. Any other comments from the room? Okay, do we have any raised hands in the Zoom meeting?
Not yet.
Okay.
We have one, Rachel, ask her to unmute, and then Chris.
It's actually Gary Chapour, and I'm with Rachel, but she's my better half. I'm on 30 Applegate. And so we live right at the end of the dead end on Applegate. The house that's going to be abutting this property if they build it. So I just have 2 questions. One is regarding if they do end up building it. There's like where they're going to build it on top of a little hill you can see there where the house is going to go. And there's some really large rocks there. So I'm just curious if they decide they want to, they have to rip this hill out to do this. I don't know if there's, just dirt under there, if there's like big lead, big rocks or something that they can't move without blasting or something. Is that something they can just do, or is that something they have to, they already know what's under there, or they're gonna have to like figure out what's there and then determine how to clear that out?
So the intent is to use the grades as you see them as much as possible. As part of our construction plan moving forward, we'd have to kind of figure out what is there, but the intent is not to level this hill or, fill in this roadway by 10 feet or anything like that. We're gonna try and work with the grades as much as possible.
Okay, because there's no way you could put a house on that hill with the size of where it's going. You can see the lines like are gonna be right under it, so it's gonna have to flatten out a little bit. Is what I'm saying.
So our grading, our definitive subdivision application will have a final grading plan, and that all those issues will get factored into how we need to grade this property to build the house that we're proposing. So that'll be, presented in the next submittal.
Okay, do you know what's in the ground there, like as far as if it's rocks, dirt, how big the rocks are? Is that how are you gonna figure that out? Because the rocks up there are pretty big, and I'm assuming it's a lot of rock because the dirt kind of runs away from there, so it's mostly rock there. So I don't know if that's something that's easy to do. I'm just kind of worried if there's any blasting going on next door that could be a problem for all our houses if that cause some structural problems or something if that happens.
So as part of our stormwater management plan design, we'll have to do test pits out there to figure out what the soil types are, if there's underlying bedrock, what the percolation rate in that soil is. So when we do those test pits, we'll make an assessment as to what's, in the area of the footprint of this proposed house and figure out what would need to be done.
Okay, I just wanted to make that point anyway, that, could be an issue. Second thing I had was about the walkway you guys that people asked about and you closed because you were asked to. Personally, I feel that if that happened, it might be worse than what's there now because when we walk through there sometimes and it's, even when it's wet, you can kind of walk through there and it's not a big deal and there's not like a footprint there where you can see any, a path. It's kind of people go wherever they go and there's not really any damage in there. And I feel like putting a pathway in there will be something that everyone can say, oh, gee, that looks great. And then 5 years from now, it's all broken up and it's all dilapidated. And unless someone's going to maintain it all the time, I just don't think it's even worth having it, honestly. No one really cares. People go through there, nobody really cares that I've noticed.
I think that's something to consider as we get to the to any final subdivision, any final plan. And Conservation Commission may have something to say about that as well. I kind of like the idea of having a path through there to connect those areas. I am also 100% with you. It's actually not necessarily 5 years, but more like 10 years that wooden structures like that might start to break down. And if there's not a maintenance plan or somebody identified to be responsible for it, that could be problematic. So my suggestion would be to also have kind of all the parties to have a clear plan for who's then responsible for that. Just 1 second, sir.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Just wanted to make that point, that's all.
Okay. So I'd like to, if you don't mind, for the people in the room, I'd like to kind of go through the comments in the audience, and then we'll go back to anybody, especially who's already spoken. I want to be sure that everybody who hasn't had a chance to ask questions yet has a chance to.
And we do have Chris on the Zoom as well, which I can
Okay.
to unmute here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll say that for that boardwalk there, that's something that I like, just connecting the communities, from one side to the other. So I'll make that comment. I'd like to see more of that type of stuff. I guess looking at the plans, it looks like there's right for that driveway, there's a lot of, I guess I'll say where I'm at. I forgot to do that. So I'm at 17 Deborah Drive. It looks like there's a lot of pavement for that driveway just to get up to the house. And it sounds like part of that that boardwalk that was proposed there was to try to get around some of the damage that gets done potentially to the wetlands as people cross through. But then we're putting, the proposal here is putting all this pavement into this wooded area up to that house. And then around that, I guess, kind of a question, just looking at that and looking at how much, it's going to impact things. I'm just wondering, it shows the pavement, it shows the footprint of the house, how much other plan there is to tear down existing woodlands or tear into the any wetlands there for yard or anything else that might be going in there that's not shown with in the footprint of the house there.
So as part of our conservation submittal, we'll have to identify tree size, species, and number of trees that would need to be removed in order to accomplish this. We did locate trees out there. I think we did 6-inch caliper and above. So I'd have to double check and see what the Conservation Commission requirement is for size. Ideally, we're going to keep it as wooded as possible. Some trees will have to get removed in order to do this development, but we're going to try and keep that to a minimum. As far as driveway and the wetlands and things like that, all of the real work on this project will be outside of the 25-foot and the 35-foot wetland buffer zones, and that's by design, so that we're not, we're reducing any impact that could potentially occur in the wetlands. And I think there was a question about grass areas or.
Like how much lawn area?
Well, that'll be part of the definitive and Concom plan as well. I mean, I imagine, in the immediate area of the house, there would be some grass area, but, we can't really alter anything past this 35-foot buffer line. So that would have to stay natural. Then you're kind of boxed in on this side as well with the 35-foot buffer from the wetlands in the northern portion of the lot. So really, the only area that would be remaining for grass is kind of the immediate area around the house. So, I'd say the lawn would be somewhat minimal out there.
And again, this is all preliminary. Does that answer your question, sir? She's still there.
Yeah, I gave a thumbs up.
Okay, thumbs up, great. Were there other questions from the room? I saw somebody raise their hand. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Cherie Oskerson. I live at 70 Martin Road. Thank you for taking my questions. When we were here at the last hearing on the 13th for this proposed subdivision of Zero Annette Lane, it sounded like the committee had real concerns about the adequate access for emergency vehicles. And we heard tonight that the fire department has said that the proposed driveway is adequate to support the weight of, I don't know how many 1,000 pounds it was. But it's my understanding from neighbors who've lived in this area that there have been prior applications and fire officials were concerned about the adequate access. And I'm just wondering what has changed. I did contact Andrew to see if there were any notes or minutes from prior applications that we could look and see what were the objections. It doesn't seem like much has changed. So I'm just curious if you can answer that.
Yeah, so we did late this afternoon go through a number of decisions from the early 90s, I want to say, perhaps late 80s, early 90s. And what we found through those decisions was a number were for variance requests based on what was the previous definition of frontage and some other zoning requirements on dead ends. Those were denied. Same on a Cpdc subdivision plan that was filed. They just didn't meet the frontage requirements of the time, and so that plan was denied based on not having the adequate and required frontage. From the readings of these decisions, there's nothing that maybe prohibits the new development of frontage that they're proposing here. There's no conditions that we found that would, I guess, prohibit this application today.
Okay, so there were no safety concerns by fire officials?
So, concerns existed on the, similar to today, stormwater drainage and also the driveway construction and what that would look like in real time and would it be even possible. So I think a lot of similar questions to today, but it was denied on the not meeting frontage requirements.
So my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that, right, we're gonna go back to that plan that showed the cul-de-sac that I said, great, it's there, but we're gonna forget about it. So, right, that's the plan that proves that it can accommodate frontage. And as we said, you likely can't build that because of wetlands. And what's happened, and I don't know when it happened, but probably since the last time this looked at being developed, there was a case law that said that we can't take into account whether that road is actually buildable because of wetlands. Like we're not allowed to do that. And so I'm speculating, pure speculation, that was not the case in the past because that was some case law that came up somewhat recently. And so it's because of that, right? I mean, if they had to actually prove first that they could build that, right, we'd be having a different discussion, right? Because they can't. But they can because we can't take the wetlands into account, right? And so therefore we sort of like don't have that concern that was there before. I mean, it may still be a concern, but we just don't have that
We
control.
can't deny it.
We can't deny
on
it,
that-
thank you. We
that
can't
basis,
deny it
yeah.
based on that.
I just remember at our last hearing, Eddie Buckley, who is a fireman, he's one of our neighbors, he was commenting how in Medford that this, maybe codes are different from different towns, I don't know, that would not be adequate access of a long driveway, you know, needing to have your hook and ladder, needing to have your engine truck with the water, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, just wanted to make sure that was clear. Just to add a little bit of flesh to some of these drawings that we're seeing, I did submit some photos that I've been taking, and I think it's gonna help all of you who haven't seen the site. Many of us are very familiar with this. So I took pictures on the 15th, there was some snow still on the ground.
Are we looking at these photos?
Sorry, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Andrew's gonna work on this. And you've added some clarification to our questions. So you can see here the end of Annette Road. How many of these trees do you suspect will be taken down to accommodate this new extension of the lane?
We might have them located on our plan, I'd have to look at it, but as I mentioned, we'll have to do a tree count for the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
So, but again, we're just extending this pavement straight back.
So pretty much all those large trees that we're seeing in the foreground.
Sure. That are located on Mr. Siebel's property.
Okay, how about the next slide, please? Please. So this is the view from where the 30-foot extension would happen, I think.
Sorry. Don't know why. Is this the right one? This was the next.
Yes, yes, thank you so much. So this is actually showing where that extension would be, and this is roughly the trajectory, if my calculations are right, going up to the top of the hill. I know someone in this committee was saying it'll be really, I know you're not conservation, but the amount of trees that we're gonna have to, that are going to be sacrificed for this, concerned about noise pollution as well, and those root systems are also helping to keep water from flowing down into all of our adjacent areas. Next slide, next photo, please. Andrew, thank you.
No problem. Sorry, it won't let me do all 10 at once.
Sure. So this is this area at the very end. It shows the current chain link fence, and in the distance down the bottom on the left-hand side, you're gonna see some wetland areas. And again, there are lots of boulders here at the end as those moved. And in a moment, you'll see a picture of the drop that I believe tonight you were saying is about 2 feet, but it certainly looks and feels more like that when you're jumping off the area. Next slide, please. So this is this wetland that people are talking about, kind of making their way through, not having a direct path, but just kind of swamping through. So it's a low area that's often filled with water. And this is the area between the end of Annette and the end of Applegate. How many of you have been out there? Okay.
I was out this morning,
Okay,
so.
thank you. Is this helpful at all to kind of visualize what's going on? The next,
And when you're out there in person, you really, especially without the snow on the ground, you can see a lot of the wetlands and things. And there's also a fair amount of ledge, the site.
Yeah, Andrew, next one, please. Yeah, so again, this is another view. You can see the existing fire hydrant there. Can you point that out, sir? It's behind the post of the.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you're proposing will be relocated to the other side, is that correct?
Yeah, it's not very usable now, behind a fence.
Right, right. Okay, I'm sorry, we'll keep going just real quickly here. Next one, please. This next one gives you a bit more of a visualization of the drop-off from the end. And I can understand Mr. Judge's idea about what is the environmental, what is the aesthetic view gonna look like? It's, I mean, here we are, so I've come down the hill and you could, I mean, it looks more like 3 or 4 feet. But the concern is it's going to extend out and be very precipitous drop, I'm assuming, or I'm assuming you'll grade it or something just so the water won't be running and flooding into the adjacent areas.
That's correct.
Okay. Next view, please. And this is just another view. Oh, I'm back to the beginning.
Oh.
I have one from the top. This is from the end of Martin looking down again. You can see your home there beyond there in the distance. Okay. And I think I have one from the top of the hill, looking down again with the pitch of the land. Yeah, here's the top of the land looking down. So approximately, this is the high point or so of that property. So many trees will be coming down for, is it 19-foot wide driveway you're proposing, sir?
Yes.
Right. Again, I think Emily asked a very good question in terms of the environmental impact. Again, this is not your area, but just considering the negative impact on the environment, potential, again, runoff to already swampy areas and noise pollution. And again, the fire concerns have been answered apparently enough adequately, so.
If I could just say one thing.
Yes, please.
Many towns, I'm not sure about Reading, but a lot of towns, the Conservation Commission has a tree replacement schedule. So if you take one down, you have to put X number back.
I know it well.
So we would follow that. So we make up what we took down. And that's why we would keep it to a minimum to keep costs, and work down. We would, take as few trees out as we needed to, but they have to get replaced per the Conservation Commission, so.
How can we find out how many trees will be taken out before you come to your,
When we submit to the Conservation Commission, we'll give you a full count. But I mean, on our plan, we locate trees, so you could count the number of
Right.
trees. I just don't have that information off the top of my head.
a lot of them?
Right, well, on the plan are the ones that are 6 inches or,
It could be 6, might be 12, I'd have to look back.
Big ones up there.
Sure, so I mean, but if you look in between the lines of what we're
greater than 6
proposing.
inches,
Mhm.
right.
All right, thank you very much.
Other comments?
Did have one more on Zoom from Miss Patricia. That's great. Patricia, are you able to unmute yourself? When I click.
Unmute. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Patricia Calabrese. I live at 17 Deborah Drive, which is just off of Applegate. In this whole area, I frequently walk this area, and I walk to the cul-de-sac on Applegate, and I can see straight through to the houses on Annette. And to me, it looks like there's absolutely no benefit to approving an extension of Annette It's gonna destroy the whole aesthetics of the entire community here. The people that currently live on Annette, they'll have no privacy. All of those trees will be torn down. You can say that you're not gonna do it, but there's no room not to do it if you're gonna try and put a house there. And then there's a few other lots in there, and this is just gonna be a stepping stone to wipe out all those woods, all that wetlands, all the barriers between Deborah Drive, Annette Drive, Martin, and Applegate. And it's gonna be like we're living in a city. This is a community of residential people who like their privacy, who like the nature. They like to be able to walk. They like to be able to have some sort of sense of nature. And this is just gonna wipe that all out.
Okay, I think we've heard you. Thank you. Did you have your hand up again? Did you want to say something else?
I think I covered.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Do you have a raised hand?
Pretty clear, just cut me off because they didn't want to hear what I was saying.
No, she's back.
Are you mad at me?
Is that somebody else who has a raised hand?
It is. Sir, I've asked you to unmute on your phone. I don't know if you get a notification on there. So it's *6.
Oh yeah, if he's on his phone, ask him to do *6.
Yeah. So if you could please try entering *6 on your phone, that might unmute you.
No, that's what I was just looking at.
I apologize, I can't seem to unmute you from my end either.
We can allow everyone to unmute temporarily.
Yeah, let's see if that works.
Yeah, can we unmute him on our end?
If you try *6 now, does that work at all? No? Never fast. Nothing?
And Andrew, you say you cannot unmute him?
I cannot now.
Oh, we can hear you.
That was somebody else.
Spread it out.
I don't know either.
Is he calling in with a different phone?
Should be the *6 specifically if you've called into the meeting.
Yeah, not on the iPhone, right?
Should be a
Right.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
There should be an unmute button in the lower left-hand corner.
Right?
If he has a question, does he want to put the question into the chat?
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
There we go.
I'm on another phone. I'm on the microphone on one phone and the video on the other phone, I guess.
All right, well, that's working. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm sorry I'm late. I had to go to work tonight, so I'm not sure what was talked about. My name is Walter Buckley. I'm at 62 Martin Road. And I attended the last meeting, and there was concerns that I raised about the fire department, and they were being okay with a one-lane road going to the house. And Lloyd had made a comment that he couldn't see a problem, or he couldn't see the reason why a house would need a ladder truck to go to the house. I spoke on that at the last meeting. I still have the same feelings. Wasn't sure if the fire department provided any kind of reasoning why it was okay now but not before.
I don't know that we have a comparison for why now relative to before, but what we do know is that the fire department has said that they are okay with the long driveway, and that they would require it to hold 64,000 pounds, and you had said that it would be wide enough for a fire truck and an ambulance to be side by side.
19 feet wide, yep.
What they don't
The
want is a
other
cul-de-sac with an
concern is
island in it.
The other concern is the drop off obviously from the road. If you do have some kind of emergency there, if you do have a fire engine pulling up to the house and a ladder truck behind it, you know, the firefighters are going down an embankment now from the road to the house. And if the house, you know, I don't want to push any bad thing on anybody, but if the house is on fire and the firefighters are having trouble getting to the house that's surrounded by woods, that's right next to houses, I would say that poses a problem.
Well, what I feel like I'm not a firefighting authority, and I feel like for this commission, we really do need to go with what the fire department has said, that they've approved for this preliminary plan. Anybody else?
No, I think once the final grading and structure location are shown, then the fire department will have a better idea of how they would approach the house.
That's a really important point, yeah, that this isn't the final approval.
We wouldn't design a driveway that's gonna have 5-foot drop-offs on either side because it's not safe for a vehicle, someone walking, anything like that. So that's all gonna have to get factored into our final grading plan, which will be included in the definitive subdivision application.
Anything else from this group?
So I do think it's important to understand what our approval
doing.
is, what we're doing here, and probably should have started this off, and I think maybe we talked about it a little bit last time, right, is that subdivision, subdivision is different than a site plan approval, which is what this board, I'm gonna say, nowadays, right, because there's not a whole lot of subdivisions going on in Reading anymore, we deal more with site plan approval, which has more to do with the design of the, it's usually commercial, but it has more to do with the design and the layout of the facility. Subdivision, right, is more of does it fit in with the regulations that were set up? Not a personal opinion of whether the subdivision works within the neighborhood. That's not really part of the. It's not part of what any board in any town in Massachusetts has the ability to control. They fit with the regulations that were set up, and if they do, then they're allowed to subdivide. That's how probably pretty much everyone's house was built at some point in Reading. Not everyone, but most people's house was, right? It was all subdivided, fit in with the rules that were set up at the time. The process here is we go through this, where we are right now, a preliminary subdivision plan, which lays out sort of the parameters of what the subdivision would look like make sure that the information is there. You know, some things that we talked about last time where, you know, we would require the road to be this way, that way. There's not a whole lot of, I'm gonna say, wiggle room in this proposal, right? We couldn't have said, oh no, we really think the road should go, you know, turn to the right instead of to the left because it'll avoid this and right? This plan is like what actually fits in this. So it's more about whether this fits in with the regulations. So and then right after we approve or not approve a preliminary subdivision plan, then it goes to the final plan, which has a lot more detail, right? Because they've gone through the Conservation Commission, they've had time to get all of those details that we're sort of asking about to the, you know, things to the foot, and then we can dig into a little bit more of those issues of how they sort of impact the neighbors and you know, stormwater, all those, you know. Conservation Commission will mostly do that. What we still, even in that realm, we still don't really have the control of whether we think a subdivision is appropriate here, right? That's not our purview, right? So I just want to make sure that everyone sort of understood sort of what we can do, either as a board or as a community, and what we can't do in subdivision, in the subdivision process.
That's great, thank
All
you.
right.
And I'll just add, you've made it so clear, and my intention is to not muddy it, all of these comments that have been shared tonight, the owner, the developer has heard them, and I think that's good. We've all heard what the concerns are, especially as the project might go through the next phases, things to keep in mind.
So I know the other thing I was going to say is, so I think our biggest, what we did see, at least from my perspective, we saw that it skillfully meets most of the dimensional regulations, you know, which is why we asked for that other plan and to make sure that happens. And right, but there is a big list of waivers, right? And so the question I think before us is not whether, honestly, not whether it meets the bigger context of whether a preliminary plan can be approved so they can go into develop more design, but whether those waivers are appropriate or not.
Right.
And some of those things, right, and I think that's really the discussion here. And I just want to make sure that there's this whole process that goes through here, which is why we'll be focusing on waivers.
Right, so what we probably should do is take a look, we have a draft decision that includes the list of waivers, and it seems like we should probably take a look at those waivers, and have a discussion on the benefits and reasonableness of those. Do you think we should start higher up in the decision with the findings and all first?
Yeah, I'm fine to scroll through it and overview. So this is a draft decision for the preliminary subdivision plan. It really just summarizes a number of the topics discussed and within the plans itself as well. So we note all of the plan set material submitted, up to date with the most recent submission. We summarize the existing conditions of the land, which is vacant, as we all know, and wet, I guess, in a quick summary. So we summarize their proposal as well into a subdivision that would extend the right-of-way, thus creating what is one buildable tract of land, one lot, one buildable lot. And we lay out the dimensions of at least what was shown on this preliminary plan, which again, more detailed to come on driveways, configuration, when the grading and all that is figured out further along. The S20 zoning district does require a minimum square footage of 20,000 square feet of land area, 12,000 of which must be upland area or non-wet area, and 120 or linear feet of frontage, which this preliminary concept does meet. The proof of concept, which was going forward, which was summarized tonight of what the proof is and isn't really their intent to build, but we summarized that as well. We did note, similar to what the applicant has mentioned previously, was that there was an order of resource area delineation approved by the Conservation Commission in 2019, and that's what this plan was built off of. Again, separately kind of noting that they do meet the upland square footage requirements, and then we get into the proposed right-of-way design, which at this point right now, the right-of-way would exist on paper in that 50-foot wide length by around 187 feet, and paved extension of 28 by 30 feet. And Andrew, please correct me if any of these numbers are wrong. But the driveway would then be built off of that paved extension of the right-of-way. I did include a note here, and I probably updated this slightly from what's in your drive from my return today, but that extension will be required to be full bituminous concrete asphalt. That extension has to meet our standards of a roadway, so that's what we were asking. And I did want to note that vertical granite curbing will be installed as necessary for a drainage design as we typically require. A note on the test borings that it's the applicant's intent to conduct test borings within the 30-foot extension, the driveway, and the area of the dwelling. But that's with the waivers. If you were conversely not to approve the waivers, they wanted to go forward on their full design, then they would be required to do test pits as standardly required in the rules and regs. So wanted to note that as well. They've submitted a waiver request for the full traffic study, which we'll get to in a second. Deciduous and evergreen trees 6 inches greater in diameter have been depicted on the plan set, but not highlighting those which are specifically set for removal just yet. No official count. No street lighting has been proposed for this extension. And then the utilities will all run underground through the driveway or right-of-way areas and avoiding wetlands as much as possible. And we noted the hydrant proposed for relocation as well. The drainage, yep.
Can I make a comment on that? You had to upgrade the water main from a 6 to an 8-inch pipe. And I don't know whether that's a Reading standard. I generally recommend against that.
Okay.
And I I've been doing waterworks engineering for 4 years, where you've only got one house off of that water main, or maybe some of these other houses are also. You end up with aging. The bigger the pipe, you've got a 6-inch, which is adequate to feed a hydrant, provided the fire flow is adequate, but I don't see any benefit to increasing that to 8-inch, and as a matter of fact, it could have a detrimental water quality effect.
Okay, it was an area of highlight that I had to confirm. I will have to do that with the engineering department and DPW. I didn't condition that by any means. They do utility work as approved by engineering, but I believe that comment was made in the DRT, so I wanted to note it. But we can either remove it, leave it, or in the definitive get more detail on that if and when we get there. But thank you for that note. I do want to note to confirm that. The drainage design is not done yet, but we did want to note that the stormwater infiltration system will look to capture 100% of the impervious area created through this development, and then also that topography and grading of as required that we do not waive. I wanted to provide a note on that as well for any future definitive application if that were to come forward, and simultaneously note that a stormwater permit application will be required with the definitive application, and that the Conservation Commission will oversee such. There has been questions as to whether some of these existing sewer and drainage easements on the site will be maintained. I don't think we need to delineate such in this decision, but it is food for thought for you going forward if you wish to try to abandon those easements on plan or accept them as is. And we can work through that process with you, whichever way you choose to go. So that was just an area to think about going forward. And then we also noted this newly proposed boardwalk, and I guess what I also wanted to note here is that the boardwalk details and specifications would also, if again pushed forward, would go and be reviewed by the Conservation Commission in greater detail. And it's no easy task on some of these boardwalks, I'm sure you know, but the footings and height requirements and separation from the wetlands underneath, there are certain standards that Conservation and DEP look to maintain for such. So all of that can be, detailed and worked through with Conservation as well, again, if and when we got to that point. So 269 Main Street was a great example, and that's just an example throwing out there that you might want to take a look at to get a better idea of what you'd be required to do for a boardwalk. But again, just wanted to note that because I think if that maintains that, we want to be sure that it's built and feasible if we're going to put it on a plan in the future. So now we get to the waivers requested. So we've removed waiver request 1 for the topography to be shown within 100 feet of locus because, as noted, that's a need and desire of the commission to help with the grading and drainage design. The applicant has also requested a waiver of requiring a detail of the proposed right-of-way, and that's really what amounts to what a full roadway profile would look like, which they aren't proposing here, given the 30-foot extension. So I believe that's the intent of that waiver request. Sorry, Pam, did you have a question?
No, I'm all set.
The applicant has also requested a waiver from a full traffic study, given what they opine is a limited impact from one single-family dwelling. Similar in effect to the environmental impact study, due to their opined limited scope and one additional home and a future conservation review. They've requested relief from such in the subdivision regulations. Now we're getting into some of the right-of-way details. So a waiver from section 711 requiring a 60-foot wide right-of-way. I guess a question if this is needed. I believe there's language that when you extend off a pre-existing right-of-way layout, that's okay, but I'd like the waiver request just to kind of put it on paper that this is going to be a 50-foot wide right-of-way proposed that would meet the width of both a nut lane and Applegate Lane on the opposite end. 60 foot is the standard requirement for a new right-of-way that would be built. And please, if you have any comments or questions, jump in anytime. A waiver from section 718 requiring the installation of granite monuments due to the limited scope and the road existing on paper. They've requested a waiver from this requirement, which again would be reviewed a bit further in detail by engineering to confirm that they're okay with this waiver requirement as well on a definitive application if and when. A waiver from section 7111 requiring the installation of street lighting given the modest scope of the roadway extension. They've requested relief from street lighting. Require relief as well from section 715 requiring the turning circle and landscape cul-de-sac island respectively. I think as we've noted, it's not their intent to build that either cul-de-sac with island or even the full roadway extension that would run straight. I kept the waiver request from 7.2 requiring sidewalks along both sides of the roadways. I guess this is where we can discuss if the applicant felt your intent was to have sidewalks on that proposed extension or not. I did not, but if I was wrong, please correct me if you'd prefer to have sidewalks on, I guess, that 30-foot bump out.
Well, there are currently sidewalks, I want to say, on both sides of Annette Lane, correct?
Do not believe that's actually true.
Just one side.
Just one side.
You said it's both sides or one, it does look like it's both sides.
Both sides.
It's both sides.
But there's no, after the driveway, there's no
There's no place to.
traffic.
Right. So the sidewalk would come, well, would go across the sidewalk driveway, I guess, on that end.
And how does this requirement interplay with, I also see the next waiver to, about the installation of street trees? Like, is it sidewalk or trees? Is that what we're facing?
I think the regulations say that you have to have street trees, you have to have a sidewalk, street trees, and then curb line, I believe. So we had requested a waiver for, the sidewalks and the street trees. Given some of the comments heard tonight, I mean, we'd be more than happy to forego the sidewalks and install screening, trees of some kind, especially on the south side of the lot, if the commission was open to that. But if we put sidewalks there, we wouldn't have any room within that 50-foot layout to install any screening trees. Because the street trees would be, I guess would go, the abutter's property, sidewalk, street trees, curbing, roadway. So I guess if we propose eliminating sidewalks and putting screening trees or screening vegetation of some kind with a sidewalk, that might be a compromise that folks might like.
So would you then walk down the sidewalk and then run into the screening trees, basically?
Yeah.
I mean, this would all come
More or
out in the
less, yeah.
final plan.
Please.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I guess that is what you do right now,
Yeah.
yeah. So it'd still kind of have that dead-endish type feel.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, sir.
I just want to ask a question, for the extended, maybe some kind of railing, speaking, it's a dead end, and it is, like I said, on my side, it's 3.5 feet. That road goes up all the way, I know it is, maybe mine goes lower. Are they gonna have some kind of railings and stuff so a car can't go through?
I think we're not to that level of design yet.
Okay, fine.
It's a good question.
It gets icy, I think it's good.
Yeah.
I guess I'm okay with granting this in the street tree waiver on the preliminary. Can we bring them back on the final subdivision plan if need be?
Like, yeah, I think I have a similar question where it's like I kind of get the request to waive the street trees, since most of this street is going to be a paper street in the trees. Is there an in-between? I would rather personally have the screening trees rather than sidewalks. I guess I'd be more personally open to granting the waiver from the sidewalks. Would not granting the waiver on the street trees put us in some sort of funny space where they've got to do street trees on the paper street?
I guess I would recommend that we waive both the requirement for sidewalks and street trees with the understanding that, right, there's gotta be a negotiated settlement here on what's the appropriate thing there. But what I think we probably all can agree to is that the appropriate thing is not sidewalks on both sides of the street, and it's probably, and I don't know if it would require this, but street trees along the paper street through the wetland, right? So I think, right, my fear is that if we don't give the waiver, then they're sort of compelled to have this design that I think we all know that we
It's
don't.
row trees through the trees.
Or sidewalks on both sides for this 30, like a condition that we know we don't want.
Right.
I mean, in all likelihood too, we'd have to look at this for the definitive, but we could potentially be digging up trees to plant screening trees, right? I mean, we might have to,
Yeah.
depending on how that row goes, where that sidewalk falls, there might already be trees there that, might not exactly fit within that sidewalk width, so I mean, that would be something we'd have to potentially look into. And then if we're doing sidewalks, we're ripping up trees to plant trees.
What about this? If we go back above to number 10, under the findings, number 10 says that under trees/landscaping/screening, deciduous and evergreen trees have been depicted on the plan. Never mind, this probably doesn't make sense. Says that they have been depicted on the plan set. We can't condition it to say the preliminary, the final plan will include screening, right?
We could do that.
Is there a way we could do that?
You could make that a condition, we wouldn't oppose that.
Yeah, I guess I'd prefer to have it in the decision as a condition rather than remembering to
Yeah.
do it later on in the
You could say that as a
negotiation.
consideration for the waiver, the applicant has offered to propose screening trees.
Okay.
In lieu of that.
Let's do that. Thank you.
It has,
Where's this? We can work on that.
And there is something actually under the conditions for trees and landscaping and screening too.
I'm gonna go back to another waiver that fits into the same category that I guess I agree that a waiver for the profile of the existing and proposed right-of-way is appropriate when you take into the whole thing. I would assume that you're gonna provide a profile of the existing and proposed 30-foot long section extension, and I guess maybe I'm thinking that I shouldn't assume that, right?
Right, we should probably.
But we should probably condition it that will be provided. Not for the entire, right, not for the entire.
I'd say the 30 feet plus the snow storage and
Yeah,
infiltration area.
thank you, yeah.
So that looks like going about 60 feet.
Yeah.
But
I just had one thing about the environmental impact study.
Mhm.
I just wanted, and I don't know if it's needed or not, but I just wanted to put down there unless required by the Conservation Commission.
Right. I was thinking the same thing.
I think it's number 6.
Oh, you mean in the findings?
No, and the waivers.
Yep.
Yeah. I just don't want to find out that, oh, sorry, they granted a waiver, you can't make us do
I
it.
wouldn't, but I'll definitely word that correctly to not impact their ability to require
Right, something like this,
yeah.
this decision doesn't impact the ability of the Conservation
Right.
Commission to require an environmental impact
Right.
study, right?
well,
Does it?
so.
They're different bodies?
Yeah, but the environmental, right, this is a capitalized term. In the subdivision regulations,
Right.
it's sort of like,
The Conservation Commission.
the
has
Conservation
requirements.
Commission can't require them to do an environmental impact study as part of the subdivision regulations, right? They just
Correct.
don't have that they don't have that control. Those are two different sets of regulations. They may require them to do study, and they will require them to do lots of studies that the environmental impact study would have always also required, and actually most of what they'll ask for is, almost everything they'll ask for is also required in the environmental impact study.
How about this?
So I'm not sure, like they're sort of like two different things, and I'm not sure.
If we were to say anything, just as a way to be clear to the public, it might be a second one that, this waiver doesn't preclude the Conservation Commission from requiring, all lowercase, studies on environmental impacts under their purview.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's probably not necessary to say that, but because there are clearly a lot of wetlands here, and if for the public who are reading the decision, it might be worth saying that.
Yeah. In looking through those regulations on the environmental impact report, the reason why we never see them or require them is because everywhere that's developable now generally has, I mean, I read through, while we're talking here, we read through all the requirements, and they're all, you would do it if it was all uplands. But since every place now that is being developed has almost always has to go to the Conservation Commission, then that's what's left in Reading to develop. So
it's not even
sort of
always that it's just a single family home, it's just that it's going to be studied through the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, because pretty much everywhere is now.
Okay, are we getting there?
Wet or rock or both?
Yeah,
No.
yes, yeah.
Yep. So I guess similar to the profile, this waiver, I guess, for discussion, but I would think that 30-foot extension is built to the construction of a way. Yeah. So I can add a similar note.
Yeah.
Conditions number 1. I'm sorry, number 2, 3. Apologize. I heard earlier tonight it's 19 feet in width.
Yep. So again, conditions noting the driveway design that will be required to be engineered and structured in a way so that the fire department can maintain access and drive their truck over it. The drainage design is not approved herein. That has not been finalized as of yet, and the stormwater permit will also be required as well. Just noting that trees to be removed within the 100-foot buffer, which is virtually this whole site, need to be approved by the Conservation Commission, and proposed street trees do not account to the replacement requirement that you had noted earlier. Utilities, again, conditioning that they are all required to be underground.
Maybe I have a question on that. So RMLD wants to install a pole. So that means anything going into the property is underground.
Right.
So the pole will get installed, those wires connected.
Correct. Other permits as well, definitive subdivision plan approval required, stormwater permits, conservation review, and other utility and Board of Health approvals that will be required in a full definitive application are conditioned herein. We noted the ORAD that was approved and the notice of intent that does need to be filed as well. And in a similar vein, when submitting a definitive subdivision plan, the health department takes a look at them as well, which we had briefly discussed at the first hearing. I didn't yet condition that exact snow storage location that they had shown on plans. I'd like input from conservation and DPW on such in the definitive to make sure that that's appropriate, and then we can rework that condition as needed. And similar, I guess, maintenance of the property must be held to neat and orderly, and as it nearly exists today in the meantime. So if I missed anything, or if you have comments, questions, happy to take them.
Any comments, questions in addition to what we've discussed? Pam, anything else?
No, I'm not seeing anything. I'd still like to have an environmental impacts report though. Whether or not we do other wording around it, I still think we need it. You've had the abutters remark about animals and so on in the area. I think it would be worthwhile. Especially if you're cutting down trees.
Discussion?
I'm not familiar with what the subdivision regs are requiring for an environmental impact report. My experience from other communities is it's typically for a project this size, it's included in the the wetlands permitting process and the stormwater management permit. But it's more of a big picture thing, but I'm not sure what the reading is.
Yeah, in general, right, yeah. A breakdown of the subdivision, how much of the subdivision is in lots, streets, roadways, sort of like what's the property made up of, right? How many recreational facilities, residential, non-residential, so, right, like a breakdown of all the different types. General physical condition of the site, including the amounts of varieties of vegetation, topography, geology, archaeology, historic features, trails and open space, right? So all of that will be covered under right, it's actually, a lot of it's on the plan already. Mm-hmm. Proximity to shopping, employment, and transportation. I'm not sure we need a report to tell us that. The nature and extent of existing water bodies, water courses, wetlands, and so on.
And conservation will require all that.
Conservation will require all that. Limitations to the proposed development resulting from soil and subsurface conditions and proposed measures to overcome them.
That's stormwater management plan, basically.
And the effect, and this is one I don't know, right? Effects of the proposed subdivision on municipal water and sewer system capacities.
De minimis is one home.
And this is where it's one home.
And that's what's in our environmental report. And that's why I think, right, the bulk of it is the nature and extent of the existing water bodies, water courses, the exposure, estimates of volume of worth material that's going to be moved, permanent post-development methods to control erosion and sedimentation in the wetlands buffer. All of that is, because there is a wetland on site, will be addressed in the Conservation Commission. I don't want a report that I need to review on that, approve on that. And that's why I would say I don't think that it's appropriate on the site.
Well, I tend to agree that because this site will clearly need to go through review by Conservation Commission, I'm willing to waive it for this body. Pam, you're the one who raised it. How does that sit with you?
That sits with me just fine. The law covered elsewhere.
Okay, great. I'm glad we went through that. Okay, anything else?
Mm-mm.
Okay, we don't have a secretary yet. So we'll take care of that later tonight. But maybe I will take a motion from anyone on the decision to approve the
So you
subdivision.
actually need to vote on the waivers.
On the waivers first, thank you.
And then close public comment and then the public.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so we'll vote on, and I think we can take the waivers
In mass, I believe, at this
on
point.
whole.
Yes,
Yeah.
I believe.
Should we close the public hearing first?
Yes, okay. So a motion to close the public hearing.
No, somebody has to make it.
I'll move more precisely. I move to close the public hearing on the preliminary subdivision application for Zero Annette Lane.
Second.
All right, and we're gonna take a roll call vote. We'll start with Pam. Pam?
Yes.
All right, Tony?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Heather, yes. Okay, now we'll vote on the waivers. Okay. Let's make a motion to approve the waivers.
Wait. Sorry, I gotta bring them up. I'll make a motion to approve the waivers requested for Zero Annette Lane, which includes a waiver requiring detail for a profile of existing proposed right-of-way, a waiver requiring a full traffic study, a waiver requiring an environmental impact study, a waiver requiring a right-of-way width of 60 feet, a waiver from the requirement for the installation of granite monuments, a waiver requiring the installation of street lighting, a waiver requiring a turning circle and landscape cul-de-sac island, a waiver requiring sidewalks along both sides of the roadway, a waiver from requiring the installation of street trees, and a waiver from requiring the construction of a way.
I'll amend that to include associated conditions.
I agree. A few of the waivers have conditions on them.
So waiver to, a motion to approve the waivers John listed and the associated waivers.
As conditions.
As conditioned, okay.
Are we we're not conditioning the waiver. Are we?
In some places we did, but we kind of,
Well, technically what we're doing is we're granting the waiver and adding conditions.
Adding conditions to the approval.
Yeah.
we put it all in there, yeah.
Yeah,
We put it all in the waiver section.
okay.
Are we confused, Sam?
I can move it to plan revisions and.
No, that's fine, if it's all in the
Yeah.
waiver section. Yep,
So the waivers as conditioned.
that's conditioned. Okay.
Okay,
I'll second.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Pam?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Heather, yes. Okay, and now we go to approve the overall decision. I'll move to approve, what's that?
Sorry, Mark, say.
I'll move to approve the preliminary subdivision plan decision for Zero Annette Lane, with the proposed street name Annette Lane extension.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Pam?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Heather, yes.
Right.
Great, thank you, everybody, and thank you for the good comments as well.
Yeah.
It was good contributions.
Thank you very much.
All right. And next up, only 10 minutes late, is the continued public hearing for the site plan review at 431 Main Street for Chase Bank. Our presenters are online for this?
They are online.
Good evening, everyone. This is Joey Fonseca with Bowler.
Hi Joey, do you want me to make you co-host for screen sharing again, or?
You're sure that would be great?
Yep.
Thank you.
Should be good to go.
All right. So again, good evening, everyone. Joey Fonseca with Bowler, and we had our first hearing where we received some feedback here regarding the proposed Chase Bank at 431 Main Street. We had submitted revised plans that addressed some of the comments that we heard during that hearing, along with a comment response letter.
Joey, we're losing you, you're cutting in and out.
He's back.
You're on mute now.
Not talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, all right, just quit unexpectedly. Try that again. Sorry about that. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. So again, we had our first public hearing. We received some feedback. A lot of the feedback was, just regarding some site layout comments regarding the egress and ingress into the site, some architectural comments, signage, and then some drainage comments. So with me here tonight is Maureen McHugh with McMahon Associates, Kevin Kelly with Core States Group, as well as Jose Sanchez also with Core States Group. So what I wanted to do is just sort of open the hearing to address some of the comments that we heard that were in our comment response letter, and kind of just go through the plans and just kind of highlight some of the changes that were made, and then we can discuss that further. So that being said, I'll start with some of the site civil comments that were heard. And mostly pertaining to the entrance off of Main Street as well as Washington Street. I'll start on the Main Street side. The comment we heard was just, more pedestrian-friendly access across the driveway, what we can do to provide that. So the plans that I'm sharing on the screen that were shared as well show a smaller raised, it's a sloped curb, concrete island here. It's more of a mountable curb. It's not very large, but will, deter, or the idea here is to deter that left turning movement when you're on Main Street, trying to turn into the site, and also deter a left turn movement as you're exiting the site. So more of right in, right out driveway. Having that closer to the street edge there kind of gives us the opportunity to have a crosswalk across the driveway opening here. And again, this crosswalk will be level across. There won't be any ADA ramps, leading down towards the driveway grade. Everything will be at grade across it. As you enter, as you enter the parking lot, it's all the same grade across the crosswalk. It's more of like a DOT driveway detail, and that's how we've laid it out and also graded out as well. So we've just added some pavement markings here again to kind of, get customers to start that right turn movement to sort of, further force that right out of the driveway. It's a similar concept that we did here. Albeit this is a little bit smaller of an island here, but again, just really with pavement markings, striping, crosswalk, et cetera, really trying to get, that right exit, that right turning movement as customers exit the driveways on both sides. So that was certainly a larger change from what we saw on our first submittal for this presentation. I did see feedback from the fire department that they actually wanted the raised islands removed. So I think that's certainly something we should discuss tonight. On that, I do want to provide feedback to the fire department just to let them know that these are mountable curbs. It is sloped curbing. It's a concrete island. We can even limit the height of them to possibly 4 inches. Again, just kind of limiting if they're concerned about driving over them with their apparatus. So those are two comments there regarding the driveways. Another was the location of the monument sign. Under the previous proposal, we were proposing to reuse the existing pylon sign. That sign is now going to be demoed, and a new monument sign will be added in this location here. Details were also provided in the sign package to you all as well. sort of highlight some of the site layout comments that were heard. The other comment that was heard was just regarding the drainage system and wanting to capture up to and possibly including the 25-year storm event of all the proposed pavement areas. Just looking through what we had for soil data, this seemed to be a more favorable location to have a subsurface infiltration system. So we proposed a Cultec system here. There's an isolated row for added water quality benefits, and it's been sized to handle up to and including that 25-year storm event. So it'll store and infiltrate and obviously exfiltrate into the ground as well. So capturing that, certainly reducing runoff runoff towards Main Street as well as Washington. We're basically eliminating runoff onto Washington Street, whereas the overflow from 25-year and above will overflow out towards the existing municipal drainage system in Main Street. So that was one larger comment there, and I think that was really it on the civil side. I can flip over to the architectural plans, and we can kind of run through those, and we can just address any comments like that if that makes sense for everyone else.
Okay.
Would it be better if we talked about the civil comments
That's fine
first?
too, absolutely.
Because I apologize, because last meeting was my first meeting, so I wasn't really up to speed on everything. But as I thought more about this project and this is an intersection in town where there's been some development north of the site on Main Street. There's a project across Washington Street on the corner that's it's also been submitted. There's obviously going to be a lot of repaving in this intersection because they've put about every possible pipe in place. So one of the things that I thought about was from a perspective, if I was a resident and I saw this building going in, the first thing I would say is, why isn't the door on either Main Street or Washington Street instead of a standalone building with the front door facing McDonald's? It's an opportunity to enhance our downtown. So that's one of my comments. But also just looking at, it looks like you're replacing the existing curb cuts with number one, concrete curbing, which I don't think is a town standard. Number two is it's just patching in spots, so it's going to look pretty poor when you have, a new concrete sidewalk, an old concrete sidewalk, a new concrete sidewalk, a concrete curb. So I don't know, and I'm not sure whether the crosswalk ramps meet current ADA compliance either. I don't believe they do. I didn't actually study them, but the way they're configured, I would guess that they probably don't meet current Mass DOT ADA standards. So I'm not sure why we're not redoing that intersection, whether it's you doing it, the town doing it, or some kind of a combination of that. And I don't know, Mary, if you had a chance to talk to engineering about if they had any plans for what's going on there, because it's going to be paved probably this summer.
So we're planning for full repave. I don't know the schedule. I don't think it's as soon as this summer. But with that full repavement, I do think, we want to try to take a holistic look at not just this intersection, but maybe Main Street in general and its connections to the road diet outside of it. At least I'm asking and pushing for that, just to take a deeper look at it while we have the chance. So that is a known need and desired need to look at further, but the schedule I don't have yet as to when that's going to happen.
And we don't know whether it's going to be just a mill and overlay, or full reconstruction, or new curbing. And
we're planning for the full repavement. I don't want to speak for Ryan out of turn, but that's our intent to try to do. But it's not on the plan or schedule yet, so it's figuring that out and what the costs and schedule will be.
You make a good point about the entryways. I didn't catch that last time either. I think we were focused on, okay, wanting the streetscape to be windows and not walls. And yeah, the access is very car oriented in our downtown.
Well, I think what's happening is in Reading is Main Street is creeping south, which is, you know, a good thing for the town. You know, we've talked a lot about, you know, now you have McDonald's next door, which is kind of, you know, not really a downtown structure. But if McDonald's came in today and said, we're gonna build a McDonald's on this site, it wouldn't be what's there now. It'd be close to the street with some sort of a storefront. Or at least that's what the hope would be. And I think that's kind of what's happening at this intersection. We're trying to make it more of part of the downtown as opposed to separate box stores along the way.
Any other thoughts or comments on that? Because that seems actually like a good segue to the architectural stuff.
Right.
Okay.
I guess to one solution to that, right, opposed to putting the front away from the cars, right, because we know how things are hard to break, change here. It is, right, I'm sure that the corporate knee-jerk reaction is, oh, okay, we'll put the cars in the front and the building in the back. And I don't think that's what you're saying, right? Because, that's right, because the corporate, right, the corporate reaction, I'm sure these guys can tell better than we can, but, right, we've seen it before, right? The corporate reaction is you gotta be able to step out of your car and be directly in front of the entrance. And so if there was an insistence of not having the entrance face McDonald's, then you flip it around and have the back face McDonald's, but the whole front of the corner would be parking lot. And we've worked really hard to so that that's not the case. And I want to make sure that that's not that's not the ask, right? If there is an ask.
I just think.
I guess it's the app. Do banks ever do two entries, or is that like
I think that's
stupid for security?
Well, and I may be off base, but I would guess that Chase has specific floor plans to meet specific sites, and they probably have one with an entrance on the west side or on the corner rather than on the south side. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that was just, I'm thinking as a town official, what do we want Reading to look like?
Right.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Jose Sanchez with Corsace Revere. And that's exactly correct. The floor plan, when we get to that floor plan, it's exactly that. There's a 24-hour vestibule that, would require, people coming up to park and, access that. So you need the parking in front of that building. On this side, we don't have a drive-up ATM. So, the majority of the business after hours would be that 24-hour vestibule. So therefore, if we did flip this building, rotate it 180 degrees, you'd have the parking on the north side. And then, I think that the access into the side would inch even closer to the intersection. So I think that was part of the planning on this one. And, Joe, you can add to that.
No, that's right. Excellent.
So when we get to the architect, it's something that's on my mind, because I'm like, I agree with what Mark has said, and I also am kind of acknowledging that what would happen is if we gave this direction to have the entrance be toward Main Street, we would have parking in the front, and that would be also not so desirable. And one of the things I'm thinking is, how is the proposal treating the entryways. It looks like there are sidewalks from Washington and from Main Street to make them look actually very inviting and kind of part of that streetscape that is now creeping in a happy way down Main Street, so that it's still feeling very pedestrian friendly and not just 100% car focused. That's one thought on my mind, to just still have this be very approachable from either actually being a pedestrian or feeling like if you wanted to walk there, it would be a friendly place to be.
Well, I think let's not let that comment pass by,
Yeah.
right, that was made previously. This is an auto-oriented development scheme that's being placed in a place that's on the edge of being auto-oriented, right? Right, with the statement of the front door has to be, where the cars are, you can't force people to walk 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 feet away from their car to walk into the front of the building, which would be on Main Street, right? That's really that's the issue. In whether we want to force that issue or not.
I don't know if I want to force it. I just want to hear the pros and cons and the concepts of, could it be done that way? What is the benefits to the town and to the Chase Bank, and what are the issues with that? Rather than, here's our typical bank that we would put on a site like this and we plunk it down in Reading. I know looking on the website that they have done banks that have a corner entrance on an intersection. But it's also, not convenient for someone who pulls up with a wheelchair and has to get around to the front.
It would be interesting just to move it up to the corner that's on Main Street.
Yeah.
Shift it up the side, so you have it on the corner, so you could enter from the sidewalk or from where the cars are.
And I'm not sure, and I'm not down to that intersection a lot, but when I am, I'm surprised at how many pedestrians are there. We do get a lot of, high school age kids walking down to the McDonald's and Burger Kings. It just seems like there's a lot more pedestrians in this general area than there used to be. And so we want to make it as inviting to the pedestrians and have it more of a streetscape as opposed to a landscape building.
Yeah.
I will say, right, because on the other quadrant of here, what's very different here, this works because the building is set in the front corner, and so the entrance and exits are pulled as far away as possible from the intersection, and that, if we were to do something that relocates those roadway entrances and exits, right, then suddenly this site would be very problematic. Right, I
It'd be
mean,
more like the
we're
ones
going
kitty
to
corner.
court over that, in other instances, so.
I also don't want to discredit what is landscaping along the sidewalk, shading potential, but I do agree with a number of the comments for sure.
There's a comment was made, can that entryway, what are the options from Chase's perspective in terms of the different building designs? Can that entryway be pulled a little bit closer to the street, still facing the parking lot, so that you have it for handicap accessibility and for the cars that come in there for after hours? I don't know if that's desirable, but is there an advantage And is it, within the reasonable design to move the doorway closer to the street, even though it's not facing the street? Or is it, and I'm torn about this because part of me still does feel like, I don't know, we could probably still have it be streetscape friendly, pedestrian friendly, feeling pedestrian friendly, driven by how the streetscape, how the sidewalk side of the building is treated. Sorry, I'm starting to stumble over my words. I guess I'm wondering, are we asking them to do something in particular here with that entryway?
If only there were an example somewhere in town of a bank that was on a main street and had an entrance on the side.
Do we have one like that? Which one?
Maybe something along Walker's Brook, perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't want to
You know,
say and compare
I know, but
two
there's a big
banks.
parking lot
No.
there also.
Yeah, no, and again, I'm just kind of looking, the architect and the engineers to see what they're thinking and how, is there a way we can make this fit more into the downtown, or is that even necessary? Or do we want to say, okay, Washington Street South is going to be this type of development in the future? There's a lot going on because that whole Ash Street intersection is going to get changed sometime, hopefully in my lifetime. There's a lot of stuff happening in this part of Reading that we want to take into account and work with the developers on that.
I think the key here is that the Washington Street and the Main Street elevations really do need to be more of a human scale and more inviting. That's the key.
I agree.
Does it make sense to just flip to the revised renderings elevation so that we can kind of go over the changes that, and that certainly, I think, address some of the comments that were made at the first hearing, and then we can, I guess,
Yes.
sort of take it from there.
I think so.
So this is Kevin, by the way, with Core Estates Group. The main comment, and especially in regards to the elevations, was regarding the north elevation. In the past meeting, it was the main comment, of course, was that this elevation was not as engaging with the human scale alongside Washington Street, and especially since this is the Washington Street side, it should be something presentable and not look like the rear of the building. So when it came to the changes, we wanted to mirror the tower from the south elevation. This, in addition with signage on this side, the canopy and storefronts to match the south, it would be more of a presentable elevation along the Washington Street side. When it comes to the decision of the entrance, it really, for this site and many other sites, it really is a balance between security and accessibility. As much as we would love to have entrances sort of face every single side, in terms of security, they really want to try and minimize them. And if there were more square footage, if the building was a sort of higher square footage, especially with the internal layout, there may have been an option for an entry, but with the way that the square footage is now, we found that for both that and security-wise, only one real main entry could be allowed, in which case, when it came to where that could be positioned, we wanted to make sure that it was as accessible to the handicap users and people with disabilities as much as possible. So that's sort of the major factor as to why it's on the south side. In terms of pedestrian engagement, that's where the sidewalks came in and access to the site, so that pedestrians would be able to go in, be able to interact with the building, while still providing the ease of access for the 24-hour vestibule to both pedestrians and handicap users alike.
and just for comparison, those two, I have the prior elevations here. This was what was previously submitted for north and south elevation, and you know the latest elevation.
The one other thing that I also wanted to add as well is that the storefront, the major programs in those spaces are going to be offices and conference rooms, so that when you are looking at it from the intersection, you are going to see very public spaces and activity within the bank. It's not like back of house areas. It's not like print rooms or anything. It's mainly going to be offices and areas of engagement, like the booths, like the conference room. So from both Washington and Main Street side, when you are looking at the building, you are seeing activity, you are seeing engagement in there. We wanted to make sure that you are seeing the best of the chase use from the major points of view.
Could you bring back that interior for a moment? I can't read it from here. Where are the tellers?
The tellers are where the cursor is. The manual station and an accessible station is that's where the tellers are going to be.
And the booths are little offices, basically?
They are essentially, they are small booths. They're basically a sort of off to the side. They're sort of instead of being in the open, somebody and a bank teller would be able to sit and be able to discuss finances, be able to discuss loans. It's sort of like a semi-private area to be able to discuss things, depending upon the confidentiality required.
Okay, so a little office. It'd be a little desk, a couple of chairs.
It's essentially an undedicated one.
Yeah.
So whereas the PCSs are sort of dedicated offices per person, like they could take them to the booths, or people when they're doing the paperwork or discussing, they could sit at a booth. So it's semi-private, semi-public.
Okay. And those
Combined 5 different conference rooms. Do you also need to have the booths there as well? How many employees are we talking about?
There is one conference room that's in the upper left portion. The others are offices, dedicated offices.
Offices.
So on the north elevation, there's still this wall that is it like a almost 19 and a half foot wall? That's right on the street side. What's that material that it's made out of? Is that cinder block? And how long, what is the width of that? I'm not quite catching that.
That whole, so that's about 45, just under 46 feet, the length of this.
No, I mean on the north elevation side, on the Washington Street side, it looks like it's where the restrooms are.
Are you talking about, the back of house area?
Yeah.
That section right there.
That section, so on Washington Street side, we still have a pretty, I mean, it's much better than it was before. Thank you for adding. Thank you for adding kind of the center area. I'm just wondering still that one piece of wall that looks like it's housing the bathrooms on the other side. How big is that wall?
Like 16 or 18 feet wide, and it's a corner stone finish.
Thank you.
It's just like get aparts because here's the building. This is it. Right? This would be the view. This is the exact design. Right?
Any other questions or suggestions here?
That's the view. That's the view from from Main Street.
We're looking at a similar one that's on.
We're looking at one, this very design built in
Oh, yeah.
Canton, Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland. So it shows this in context. This would be the view from the Main Street corner.
I like the glass on the corner, I'll say.
Yeah, no.
I like that.
I think so, yeah.
I think it, and I tend to agree that with people inside, at least during the daytime, that will add liveliness. Of course, at nighttime, it's going to be not lively.
That would be like the view from that corner.
But it'll be lit, right? I mean,
Some trees.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean,
additional.
yeah. That's straight on Main Street.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not.
It's not.
Correct, there'd be minimum lighting required in the main office spaces, but then the 24-hour vestibule would be lit 24 hours. And if you're looking at it from the corner, that on the north elevation, we call that the jewel box. You could probably see from there all the way into the 24-hour vestibule.
okay.
Because that's all, it's all glass. And if I may add, all the interior offices have we call it's a privacy glass, and it's all immounted partitions that are glass as well, so you can see through the whole building.
You say you do see through the whole building, you don't see through the whole building?
Correct, you do.
Okay.
Washington Street.
The only difference would be that back of house where that Coronado stone is. Those walls back there are more, that's all chipboard.
And then are you proposing landscaping on how are you treating the sidewalk that comes from, say, the Main Street side to the entryway?
I think that's not bad.
Yeah, no, that's,
Yeah.
as you're coming down Main Street.
This is the landscape plan that was submitted, so there's landscape between the sidewalk, basically around the entire perimeter of the building, with some shrubs, wood plants. So,
And where you have the large tree, I'm sorry, I just don't have the landscaping plan right in front of me, right there. What's on the ground beneath that? It's not,
that's just grass.
okay.
It's basically grass between the sidewalk and the landscape beds around the building.
I apologize for going back. You mentioned that the stormwater system would cover a 25-year flood?
The 25-year storm event.
Isn't it usually a 100-year or 50-year?
Yep.
Yeah, but
There is the requirements from the engineering comment was if we could capture, so the existing, the proposed site, the prior proposal, under that proposal, we were already reducing impervious coverage by about 3,500 square feet. So this, just as a redevelopment, we were already meeting the minimum standard for the mass stormwater regulations there, with some increase in water quality improvements. The requirement the comment that we received from the engineering department was that they wanted us to handle or capture up to and including that 25-year storm event for all the proposed impervious surfaces, which is the system that was designed for this site.
I'm just thinking that's a little short-sighted because they're going to be changing the number of storms we get every 25 years.
Correct, but in the base case, under the existing condition, like I said, there's 3,500 square feet of pavement that's running directly off-site towards Main Street, towards Washington Street, that's, basically unmitigated, and certainly not any water quality benefits to it. Here, you're capturing, the 2, 10, 25-year storm events. Those are the more frequent storm events, with no overflow component that's feeding into Main Street. Essentially, from 2 to 25, there's very little flow going off-site. Whereas in the existing addition, I think there's about, anywhere from 1 to 2 CFS that's combined to even towards Main and Washington Street. So you're reducing peak flows and volume quite a bit.
Okay, and what are you doing to separate the second lot from the neighboring house on Washington Street?
So this lot is part of this overall parcel here. This is just going to remain as just a grass lot. Today, I think there's some vehicles stored in here and some gravel piles. All that will just be cleaned up and will just be a grassed lot in between. I think there's an existing dwelling here. This will just remain. The vegetation will remain and will just be a grass lot.
All right, but what's separating out the lighting that you've got on the east elevation of the building from that property?
The abutting parcel, or you're saying the abutting parcel?
The abutting parcel.
Yeah, we have, a lighting plan was prepared, that doesn't show us to go over into that abutting parcel. Let me just print that.
Yeah, I will say that lighting plan was impossible to read because it was too blurry. At least in
So it's not just me.
No, in the version that we got, like whatever format that lighting plan was in, and obviously lighting plans have tiny font, but even when you try to zoom in, you can't get those numbers read.
Okay, must have been scaled down for some reason, but.
So, yeah.
I'll zoom in here, you can see that there's the light pole here alongside the proposed drainage system. We're getting 0 readings on the backside. This is the parcel that's connected to the Chase Bank lot, and then you've got the existing residential building that's located sort of where this summary table luminary schedule is. So we're getting 0 within our parcel, so clearly there's no spillover that's going over to that light parcel.
No, but there is a basically lit up back of a building that these people are looking at. Now, I do know that there's some shrubbery, I want to say between those two lots, the Washington Street lots currently that were put up. I don't know whether that's on what would be Chase Bank's property or on the new building property, the residential unit.
So there is a row of shrubs here. This is the abutting parcel here. This is the existing grass parcel. There are some vegetation here, and there are some large trees around the corner scattered throughout. All of this would remain. We're not removing any vegetation here. It's mostly just cleaning up some of the gravel piles that exist, and obviously the vehicles and storage containers that exist here would be removed. So all the vegetation on here would remain within this parcel.
I think what Tony's getting at is politely requesting that there ought to be some buffer between the commercial space and the abutting residential space.
Sure, we could certainly have our landscape team take a look at that and see what we can do to plan.
All right.
It's a small buffer between there, but we can certainly take a look at it between the Chase and this lot. But we can certainly take a look at that
And I'm just
And
confirming.
I think that,
Go ahead, please.
sorry, the building itself, I believe it only has 2 tube lights, and then there might be a light over the door. But those tube lights are up and downs. So yeah, there shouldn't be much spillover there either.
So is it all downcast, like dark sky compliant type lighting?
The light poles that are dark sky compliant, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these are also dark sky compliant.
I believe that, yeah, I think those can be just down lights. I think they're originally to be up and down, but they are capable of just being down.
I think especially on the residential side, it's important for them to be just down. And then I want to make sure I'm understanding this. So is there, because it is hard to see, is is there lighting only on the non-street side of the building?
Sorry, what was that question?
Is the lighting only on, so on the street side of the building at nighttime, it will just be kind of dark and only lit by street lights?
Except the north elevation showed us some more of those tube lightings.
At the very back, over by the residential side.
And on the Washington Street side in the back as well, minimally.
Oh, I was thinking about the Washington Street side. So yeah, I guess I'm wondering what will be the lighting on the Washington and Main Street sides?
So you've got at least 2 tube lights on the Washington side on the brick facade. You've got one in the back that you can see off of that north elevation. And you've got the light over the door and the second light on the east elevation.
Facing Main Street, you know, we've got a uplight here on this, 2 on this corner. I think that's it for lighting on this elevation, and then 2 on the opposite side, facing the parking area.
And can you go back over to the Main Street side? So what I'm thinking about is this, I'm thinking about the reality that Main Street is kind of creeping and we want it to be pedestrian friendly, and that, to me it would be, I'm thinking about the nighttime scape also, and to me it'd be a shame at nighttime if there was like, even like a building, say there's something other than the McDonald's eventually, and say you could eventually walk to the grocery store and have an easy time of it. Is this going to be a dark, unfriendly spot on Main Street? Like, do we actually want to have a little bit of lighting on Main Street, and is there a way you would do that?
You would do it with streetlights.
Yeah, we could just have it be with streetlights.
Ornamental streetlights, but I'm not sure what Reading is doing with if there's a standard and what they're doing on the other buildings on Main Street, the new buildings. But,
I guess my question would be, right, like, as you said, you'll be able to see straight through all of that
That's
glass
right.
windows, straight through the building. You know, right, a lot of
Correct.
Commercial buildings just
Correct.
leave lights, security lights
Yeah.
on, and so.
That's right.
So, you know,
Correct.
I
You
don't
have
know
some
what the
safety,
experience is like.
Safety lighting
Yeah.
on, 24-hour state in the office buildings or the office area, plus the, fully lit 24-hour vestibule.
That's enough then.
Yeah, so there will be
So that's
some lighting coming out of those
Right.
windows,
Okay.
right? Is there on?
Yeah, it would be a glow, pretty much.
That's enough for what I was
Yeah.
thinking about. Thank you.
I guess as we're talking about lighting, right, couldn't really read the lighting plan all that well, right? Oftentimes, lighting plans do not include the emergency, pack lighting above the doorways. In this particular case, I think that's what that is on the west elevation above that doorway, right? Yeah, the emergency to the right of that, where you're just pointing, yeah.
Yes,
And
that's the
so,
emergency light, yep.
right, and I guess to Tony's point before about making sure, right, like, that's the last thing you want is having that path lighting shining in your neighbor's,
Right.
building 24/7. So let's be cognizant of that, especially as it plays in with the lighting plan.
Understood.
Because we're never going to say don't put emergency lighting at a bank, right?
And that emergency light would only be for like a 5x5 space outside that.
All right.
So yeah, it would be downlight and just enough to light that area.
All right.
And that gets to just, being almost even a little precautionary to take care of some screening between there and the neighbors.
And that's the kicker. You're right, the light doesn't spill, but I am looking at a lit up wall at night.
Yeah.
The landscape plan does incorporate some
yeah.
shrubs here, along here. I'm not sure the heights on these.
We might wanna have it be high enough that they're providing some screening.
Yeah, they look to be about 5 to 6 feet in height at planted, so, and arborvitae as well, through there. So that's a 5 or 6 foot height. Screen wall, along here. I'm sure the board feels that's high enough, but that's typically what, what we've seen as far as a, planted kind of buffer there between the two uses. So it'll be a mix of vegetation through there, all roughly within that 5 to 6 foot height.
At planting, how high will they grow to?
That I would have to probably get back to you on, but these are all, arborvitae and junipers. So they, landscape architect, but I can certainly get back to the team on that, but I imagine these can get pretty tall, so certainly have to have a vegetative screen there.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Do we want to talk about this signage?
I'm wondering about that same thing. Is there signage with this plan? I don't think I saw it, but I may have missed it.
There is, yeah,
So,
see a lot
right,
this time.
I guess, first off, just in terms of a clean package, right? This signage plan includes, some plan that isn't being proposed about a drive-up space on the adjacent part, on the grassy, the grassy. So we want to make sure that that's not included so that it's not inferred that that's
correct.
being improved. Yeah. That's item 1.
Okay. What's the sign package?
And then I'll say I like this this monument sign. My question on it, however, is it says illuminated, but it doesn't really say anything more than that. What does that really mean? Item 1. Item 2 is is it allowed, or what needs to happen? What process?
Yeah, so because this would be a new freestanding sign, and this isn't something I've gotten to the applicant yet because I just returned today and just looked at this today, this monument sign, so it would actually require a special permit through CpdC. So I think there's 2 separate paths here. One, wall signage you can discuss and conditionally approve. That would in turn require sign permit application, but we could then approve that if it beats what they proposed here, if you were to approve it. The monument sign, I'm working to condition that that's actually, it is required to go through the special permit process, so it would be a hearing, I guess a new hearing if and when they propose that. I was trying to condition it so that we weren't up, if they wanted to vote, if they wanted to move forward tonight, that we weren't, withholding that. But it's important for them to know that that will require a special permit process and hearing advertisement and coming before you with more information. I also questioned what the illumination style was and so on. So I would say that doesn't need to be discussed tonight because it's really not for consideration at this point. Does that make sense, Joey, to your team?
It does, yes. Do you have any questions there? I think that's clear.
Yep, same.
Thank you.
Other than that, I didn't actually have any questions on the signage.
I don't even know what's
No, it looks fine.
the interior signage too. Okay.
But yes, I too will go through this and make sure we're not approving ATM signage and lighting that's not,
Yeah, we'll coordinate with Philadelphia so I have those references removed.
Wonderful. I guess I just also kind of wanted to re-clarify if I can. So these crosswalks you're proposing at your drive aisles are not ADA compliant, is that what you said?
No, they will be ADA compliant. So they won't be, greater than 2% slope in any direction. This is all flat through here, so it's not like we're dealing with, over a 5% pitch across there. What I was saying was this method of pedestrian access keeps these sidewalks flush on both ends of the driveway so that you're not dropping down. You don't have two ADA ramps on either side of it with, a tactile pad on the bottom of it. You're actually up at the street level, so it's continuously across. It actually, because the drop of the driveway is at the street level, it does create, the drivers to slow down because you've got a sharp drop as you enter the street right away. It does slow you down. Maureen can probably describe that better than I can, but it does slow you down, and certainly you're aware of it. You see that there is a sharper drop there, and it's more of a pedestrian-friendly drive. As I mentioned before, it's on the DOT detail that they require us to provide in most sites. I'm sure there are sites on Main Street that have a similar application.
I want to just make sure I'm understanding. I heard you say before, and I didn't really understand the first time earlier in your presentation. But so the crosswalks are at the sidewalk level, and then it drops down to the street on the outside of the sidewalk?
Correct. So this is all, the grade that exists here on the existing sidewalk is, granted there's a cross slope across from it, but this grade, so as you're walking, you're staying at sidewalk level across the driveway. So you've seen traditional ADA ramps where you're on the sidewalk and then you drop down 6 inches, you're at the driveway level. This carries straight across, so your driveway is flush from the parking area through the crosswalk, and then as you drop down towards the street grade, your drop is sort of in this kind of 1 foot level. The detail that's shared across both sites. It's more prevalent on pedestrian-friendly applications such as this.
I really like that. I was looking in the plan set for the detail of the island, especially after seeing the comment from the fire chief. I'm gonna say I hope that we can get to a place where we can detail that enough. So that can remain, even if it means, limiting the height or whatever, so that the fire apparatus can go up and over it without a problem. Which I think we would want. I mean, we obviously want, right? But hopefully we can provide enough details so that they can be comfortable.
I agree, and
I think that's a great detail.
I do too.
Same.
That's a really great solution. I'll just.
Yeah, I think it works, and I agree that specifications in detail for discussion with PTTF, which includes fire as a whole, will just be a benefit for us to kind of say this is an appropriate design and get comfortable, hopefully, with it. So I would like to bring it back to them for discussion.
Okay, great.
Condition that.
Are there other elements of this that we need to discuss?
Do we need to discuss snow storage and removal?
Oh. Is it gonna ever snow again? Sorry.
For the next 7.5 years, you'll have snow on occasion. After that, it's Florida.
I think snow removal will likely, obviously the site is limited with where the snow is. It'll probably, some will be piled up along the side here to, not block any drive aisles or parking. But I think as some of the larger storm events, I think they'll likely just be hauling snow off-site, so they're not storing it on-site and blocking parking spaces. So it's limited with some of the landscaping here, but I think some of it will stay on site, but under larger storms, likely be removed from site.
I ought to know this, but What is the parking requirement versus the parking that you've provided?
I think it's 11 to 15.
Correct.
So
11
you're,
required, 15 are proposed.
So you have 4 more parking spaces than what are required.
And no loading zone is required.
although they have one.
Yeah, and we're showing a loading area, although this wouldn't really particularly have a loading area. We showed on the plans just to show, the dash area for potential loading space. Ideal, with bridge trucks, they're going to pull into a parking stall, offload and exit. They're not actually parking a vehicle in a loading area. This is all serviced by smaller trucks.
The reason why I brought up the question about parking is that at least from a, in theory, right, you could block up 4 spaces as a temporary snow storage location until such time you want to cart that off. But, as part of your storage plan, if you want that to be the plan, I mean, the bank may not want to, the bank, right, and that's their prerogative. But if you have extra parking spaces, I think that's an option as how to sort of lay that out.
Yeah, then it really becomes a management decision as opposed to an infringement of what the parking needs are.
Because I could see, on some of those snow events, stacking snow up in the right-hand upper corner there for a couple of days.
Yeah.
To just get through it and then.
Yeah.
All right, what else?
I guess on property maintenance too, just making sure there's no exterior trash enclosure. Is there a typical process for trash removal on these sites of larger trucks coming in at all?
So this location won't have a trash enclosure. Yes, it's trash is handled through, I think, a third-party security vendor. Jose or Kevin, you can correct me on that, but I believe it just gets handled. Like I said, there's no dumps there, so there's no truck that's actually going to be accessing the site pool to empty those, but I think it's the private vendor that collects that.
Correct. I think most of it gets shredded by a third party, and then any trash would, I believe for this one I can confirm, but I think it would be taken by the cleaning crew.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, Andrew, that we want some condition or some sort of understanding about sort of maintenance of regular maintenance of
the abutting lot.
The abutting lot,
Yep.
the grass lot, to make sure that's kept up.
Yes. It's necessary.
Trash removed or whatever. Trash.
And do we also have a construction plan at this point?
No, but Joey, correct me if I'm wrong.
With respect to, are you talking about construction schedule or?
Right, and like parking vehicles and any demolition and hauling off materials?
So included with our plan, we have an oil, soil erosion sediment control plan that just kind of highlights protecting some of the existing catch basins, soil, potential soil stockpile areas on site. As far as the environmental side, tank removal, that'll be done by a registered LSP that's going to be handling all of that. That's done by on the environmental side, so that'll all be obviously done through state approvals, under state supervision, et cetera, on that, with respect to all the underground storage tanks for the existing gas use.
Okay, thank you.
And Pam, they've got that extra lot behind them,
Yes,
so there shouldn't be much interruption for traffic along Main Street or Washington Street.
right. They'll use it the same way it's being used now. They'll store their vehicles there until they're ready to clear the site.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, you're not anticipating lane closures for construction, right? You got enough space?
I don't believe they would be, no.
There'll be a little bit where they're doing the curb cuts.
Correct, right. I was gonna say that there will be some curb installation, certainly some saw cutting along the driveway, aprons on both Washington and Main, but other than that, and then utility connections, but I don't believe there'll be parking lane closures. May I take that back? The water service that's teeing off the existing service, that may, we may need a temporary lane closure there for installation of that utility, but that's all I can see.
It's child's play too, compared to what we're used to these days.
Right.
But it did make me feel like, oh, we should be asking the question every time, right? So, is anybody not ready to look at the decision? Is there anything that we need to have them come back to us on, or should we proceed to the decision?
I think it sounded like Andrew had some things that you still needed to check in with.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think we covered them. I just want to note, so we got the drainage report today on this infiltration system. So that hasn't been confirmed yet. We have to look at it to just make sure their numbers work and align with the capture of the 25-year storm, but there's a condition that the design meet the requirements of the engineering division. And we can go through this as well, but there's condition to provide the detail and specification on the island so we can discuss as PTTF if you feel comfortable with that. If you'd rather, get them yourselves and discuss, that's totally up to you guys as well. But those were about the two items that I just had left to condition and confirm on my end.
There's a raised hand.
Oh, I
So I was gonna say
haven't asked for any public
yes.
comment, yes. Yes, there's nobody in the room, so I'm sorry, I forgot, but in the Zoom room, is there any comment from the public?
Just asked to unmute.
Hello?
Yes, hello, we hear you.
Hey, my name is Fadi Malki. I got a question about this. It's a gas station over there. Who's gonna be doing the cleanup and the removal of all the existing fixtures, tanks, and pipes and all that stuff? Who's gonna be doing that?
Okay, would our project proponent like to respond to that?
Sure, there'll be, an environmental company, an LSP that will be on site that will be there monitoring all tank removals. It's a state process that's going to be required here. So they'll be monitored, accordingly, like all gas station investees get removed. So there's a whole process. There's an inspection period. There'll be a registered LSP on there to monitor the operation.
And who's gonna be paying for the work? Who's gonna be doing the work? Chase Bank or the landlord, the owner of the property? Who's gonna be doing that?
That I'm not sure who's going to be performing that work. If it's, I'm not sure what the lease language is on this one, but it will be either the property owner or Chase. I'm not quite sure, but it's going to be either one.
But it won't be the town.
Correct.
And I noticed one more thing, there's only one handicap spot for the parking in the lot, or there should be more, I don't know the code for that. That's another thing I just noticed.
Correct, yeah, with the parking lot being only 15 total spaces, only one is required. For
just noticed.
It's less than 25.
Well, interesting. That'd be it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Was there another hand or was that it?
Sure. That's all I had.
Okay.
That raises a good question. I see the parking spaces seem to be 18 feet long I've got a couple that are listed at 9 feet. The handicapped is 8 with an 8-foot handicap lane next to it. Are all the spaces 9 feet?
All the standard spaces are 9 by 18, the handicap is 8 by 18, with an 8-foot loading area, perfectly accessible.
Okay.
Okay.
If you want to approve the final plan today, I have no problems with it, but I would prefer not to approve the signage plan until they come back with one that's actually covers the real signage and not every potential sign.
Yes, actually, that's a really good point, because we would be inadvertently approving an awful lot of stuff.
Or is there a potential that we can just, right, because I think there's just 2 pages that seemed pretty clean, and then some pages, a number of pages that were not.
So for me, what we can do is the findings speculate what signage you would be approving, which is the 2 wall signs and their dimensions. And the condition that I tentatively placed was those could be administratively approved if and when the sign permit application is delivered, and that they meet those dimensions and illumination style. And if they were to exceed that, then they would come back to you.
It's like he's done this before.
I think he's done this before, yes.
And what we can also do too is take this package and stamp the exact pages that are CPDC approved and completely remove the ones that are not. So that is also
That would be useful. I'm okay with that.
Yep, me too.
I feel like everything we've talked about here, including the items that we'd be leaving for administrative approval, are okay. It would save us going through this all again.
So I guess my question for you then, if and when we, as PTTF, again, if you were amenable to that condition to rediscuss the islands, if it was found that no islands was the course, I guess, what is your level of comfort with that? And just if that were to, become the point.
I would assume some sort of rumble strip minimally.
Striping and some sort of
delineation,
textured pavement at a minimum. Yeah.
That gives a person a pause. They don't want to drive over it not knowing what it is yet.
I don't know if it has spikes coming out of it.
Yeah.
It does. There is a psychological thing there when it's really uncomfortable to walk on. But there, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I
Minimally
agree.
something that differentiates it and that corrugated.
Yeah.
I agree the islands would be the ideal, and that's what,
The islands would really be the ideal. I mean, even if it's just something that a fire truck can drive over, but that you don't normally want
Yeah,
to
they do it on the edge of roundabouts all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the trucks can get
I
around.
do think the comment too might have been related to thinking that this wasn't a slope granite curbing, it was vertical granite, and they're concerned about, cutting a tire, I think they consider vulnerable, so.
Which is-
I think,
Yeah.
once they have a detail, I think that it might result in a question.
Right.
I'm really hoping that can work, because I would actually look forward to seeing that example right in town.
So I guess I'm not clear where we ended up with the sign package, of whether we go,
They're gonna need a special permit minimally for the monument.
Right.
So they're gonna have to come back anyhow. I would recommend we just hold off on the signage until that point, and we can approve the signage when they're doing the monument.
Yeah.
Approve everything but the signage now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's actually,
Yeah.
that will help keep us straight.
And I think they heard what there's no real issue with the wall signage. So.
Okay.
to the degree that gives some comfort level to sort of move this stuff along. Right.
All right, let's go to the decision.
One of the other comments, I'm just looking through the conditions. Sidewalk improvements, you didn't have any
Sorry, give me 1
comments.
second, I did add language today. So again, similar fashion to most draft decisions, we outline the proposal and the submittal materials, the general findings of the proposed use, the existing site and the zoning district that it's in, and then what triggered the site plan review in this case. We detail the site circulation and access movements described throughout the hearings herein, as well as the parking requirements versus the proposed parking. We did summarize the interior space as well, the 24-hour vestibule and inclusions of that interior space. Utilities, the drainage as well, with the new infiltration chambers added, we've noted those. And then again, operations and maintenance plan of such is included in the drainage report, and we did get that revised drainage report that we just have to confirm meets our requirements. So we described the landscape and lighting herein, as well as the TIS findings, which we had reviewed in the earlier hearings. We did want to note that there's no resource areas within the 431 Main Street site. However, the 167 Washington Street parcel does potentially have a sliver of the 100-foot wetland buffer, so the applicant has been in conversations with conservation on that, the intent of that parcel is there. So this signage section, I'm just gonna reflect no signage approved herein. So we can make that change, and then we quickly summarize the dumpster and trash management through the third-party vendor and the snow storage expected. In the conditions, you're right, in sidewalk improvement, it was blank, so I added language par for the course from our other site plan decisions that any repair or improvements from damage to the sidewalk during construction will be needed for repair and or improvement as deemed necessary by engineering. I guess as they're avoiding corners to avoid the ADA ramps here and there and whatnot, but if in the field it's determined that the impact has been too great, we do have the ability to require. So it's important to note for the applicant as well, but I hope that meets what you hope for intent as well on sidewalk repair. We did note that the applicant shall work with the engineering staff to satisfy requirements for drainage and infiltration in this case. And same with conservation for landscaping, snow removal and drainage. On plan revision, so far I've conditioned the revised drainage report, which again we did receive today, but we haven't looked at it yet in detail, so I kept that condition in for now. I did also condition that they would submit specifications of downlighting fixtures for the east building facade, and actually I think this is found not to be needed for additional Main Street lighting, so I can remove that. In similar fashion, all other permits required, pre-construction.
For a second,
Yep.
go back, you just have it on the eastern facade? The applicant shall submit specification of downlighting fixtures for the eastern building facade?
Yeah, I specify whether they abut residential, but I imagine maybe they'd want consistent throughout the building as well, but I guess
For all facades.
all facades.
If they put some on the front, then it should be downlighting.
Okay. So yep, all other permits required and not approved herein. The pre-construction meeting, which we would hold to review their schedule, construction, pedestrian access plan, and so on, as required and typical for our reviews with multiple staff departments. Here's where I added PTTF comment that the applicant shall provide additional specifications and detail on those mountable islands, and the PTTF will review and comment on such. And I am also happy to forward any discussion to you guys as well from that meeting. So we can get that from the applicant for future discussion. And then
Wait, go back to the construction schedule. I would like to add in any of the conditions that we had for the for closing off of Main Street and Washington Street at
peak hours.
Yeah, which one?
Peak hours.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it's called, peak towers now?
Peak, and no,
sorry.
At peak hours,
Yeah.
right,
Is that what you're asking?
Those, whatever.
Yes, the same, basically the same conditions we had for Main Street and that we had for, is it 459 Main Street?
Yes, yep. Okay.
The other thing that when I marked up the construction management plan was to have the construction schedule revised as required for changes in construction.
Sorry.
Because they submit the plan that says, oh yeah, we're gonna have this done in 6 months. And then
they don't.
They don't, yeah. And they're like, when are they gonna finish?
So sorry, what was your request for a condition?
Just that the plan is updated,
okay, if they
as
exceed.
required.
Yeah, gotcha.
And you probably talk about that at the pre-con.
Yes, yeah.
And I like to see it in a GAN format, but I don't know whether these guys do that.
Okay. Add language on that. Add language on the lane closures. That might actually make sense during construction. We'll figure that out. All our other standard during construction conditions, including hours, activities, inspections by staff, any plan changes that may arise will need review and approval, potentially even by you guys. Conditions for after construction, which really should be occupancy. So I'll change sign permits to no signage approved herein. We'll want all the pavement markings shown on the plan to be painted and striped as shown. The operation and maintenance plan, again, that we have will have to be complied with. As-built landscaping, including maintenance and cleaning of the abutting 167 Washington Street lot. I'll work on that language to improve that a bit as well. No delivery trucks queuing on Main Street. Snow removal as described, trash removal as described, and the stormwater infiltration maintenance as well. So I hope that covers it all, but if I missed anything or questions,
Missing one on the landscaping for the buffer somewhere between the building and the
167 Washington.
I thought 167 was their lot.
Oh, so you want additional shrubing and landscaping?
Oh, no, I want to make sure that the plantings will grow to a height of at least 12 feet within 5 years or something. I know we've had that somewhere, that the plantings are expected to grow to a height of X amount within so many years.
Right, and that way the proponent doesn't need to come back to us to say, okay, I checked on this, but that's just what we'd like to do.
Okay, so give me 1 second. Yeah, so that shrubing was here, the 5 to 6 plantings,
Right.
not here. Just want to make sure we're talking about these plantings, right? And not
Plantings between the building and the residents. If the applicant feels that it works better putting in the buffer along 167, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
So it's plantings that are intended to screen the building from
Yes.
the neighboring residents.
I can reach out to tree warding for language on this as well. Don't know if we'll be so specific as to this, but at least a condition that they're growing.
The time frame, like it will grow up to a height of 12 feet.
Looks good.
It does look good. Should we vote? Would anybody like to make a motion?
So what we got?
I think similarly, you'll have to close the public hearing.
Yes, I do. I just keep forgetting to do that. I'm sorry.
Make a motion to close the public hearing for 431 Main Street, Chase Bank.
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call. Pam,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Heather, yes.
I will make a motion to approve the site plan review decision for 431 Main Street, Chase Bank as amended.
Well, second?
Okay, we'll do roll call vote. Pam,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Heather, yes.
Wonderful.
Okay, so we'll see you back for the sign application. And thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a great night.
You too. Okay, so something on our agenda that we need to do is we have a request to continue the public hearing for the 40-hour plan review at 25 Haven Street. I imagine we need to have somebody, like Tony, you do this so well, read this into the record.
Wait a moment while I find it.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's just like at home. I'm able to do it and all of a sudden I'm doing it for everybody. I've just closed my folder. All right, here we go. Haven Street.
It's nice and short.
It is nice and short. It is. I probably could have just went ahead and read it.
Motion to accept the, forget what it's even called now. It's not a delay, it's,
Request for continuance?
thank you. Motion to accept the request of continuance from 25 Haven Street, Reading, Mass, per the letter dated
March 20th.
March 21st. Dear Ms. Klisch, please accept this letter on behalf of 25 Haven Street LLC requesting to continue the public hearing on this application currently scheduled for April 10th, 2023 to the Commission's next available hearing date on May 15th, 2023. We hereby likewise agree to extend the 120-day period under Section 10.5.11.2 Paren 6 to June 13th, 2023. Joshua Latham.
Okay.
Second.
Pam seconded. Okay, we'll do roll call. Pam?
Yeah.
Oh,
Question. What time
Yeah.
on?
oh yes, what time?
So I was thinking 9:30. We have a few slots open beforehand, but at this point, I'm not inclined to do so just yet.
That's fine. Yeah.
Amend to 9:30 p.m.
Okay. So we'll do a roll call vote. Pam,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Heather, yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
What is 25 Haven Street?
The old Rite Aid.
That was the new senior center.
No.
It's a
The ones
potential.
across
Or it
from
was the new senior
Populous,
center.
yeah. Was that ever a Walgreens also? Did it go Rite Aid to, no, it was just all, anyhow,
No, it closed when they had the Walgreens because we already had 2 into town.
that's right. Okay.
Before the Rite Aid though, it was the RMLD offices.
So we have some other things, it is late, we have some other things, there, and it was in our packet, do we need to do something about this Veterans Way bond reduction?
I'm actually gonna not do that tonight, so their request was to a lower amount, we had set a higher amount than they requested. I had not gotten a revised Form M or any feedback from the applicant and developer, so at this point I'm not
Okay.
willing to endorse it when it's not the right numbers, so we can skip that one. Some brief updates if you want to just go in order down this list. So, Oakland Road, as you know, is we're talking about the municipally owned land abutting the high school. This isn't much of a substantial update other than to alert you to the facts. I should start with a concept of housing was presented to you in September, October 2022, and there was a lot of public concerns and feedback on that concept, and really kind of, I guess, an idea that more discussion is needed before we really hit that level of detail on the site. So what we've identified is a program through Mass Housing, what's called the Planning for Housing Production Program. It's a grant opportunity that we may be looking to submit for Oakland Road that really pushes further engagement on a higher level on housing, and it is housing specific, so it's not it wouldn't, really be for what is the best use of the site. It would be more focused on, is housing the correct use of this site and why? So there's a 10% cash match award, it's a rolling deadline, there's a few requirements of the application itself, but I just wanted to alert you to the fact that we will be looking to submit an application in the coming weeks for this, so that in 2023 we can start the public engagement process in a much higher, broader level of the use proposed, and engage the community at large, specific stakeholders, and land use boards and other town management as well on it. So it's a very holistic and comprehensive public engagement approach. That's really what the program is focused on. And on top of that, it can also help fund pre-development site needs of geometric studies, site layout, conceptual elevation, all of it. So it seems like a very comprehensive program, and if and when we were to go to submit, I can certainly share a draft application with you, and we might be looking to ask for a letter of support from the Cpdc for the application itself. And then where those conversations go from there are TBD. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and ask if you had any feedback or thoughts, I guess, that immediately strike you on such, just to make sure we're headed down the right path.
Can the grant also be used for the MBTA communities discussion?
No, but I have a separate.
I think that's a good idea since there seems to be a focus on housing on that site, understanding, having that broad discussion about whether that's the right thing at that location, I think is probably a good focused way to get that conversation advancing in some form.
Yeah, I agree. I guess one question I have is by getting, by seeking the assistance, are we in fact committing to some form of housing there? Or is the process open enough that we're asking ourselves, okay, is housing the thing, and if so, what kind of housing, and is that generally the question that we'll
That is generally the
asking
question. So I
ourselves?
don't think you'd be boxing in a use by any means. You know, if this were to move forward, it would certainly require CPDC hearings if and when there was a site plan and or ZBA, depending on the avenue forward with housing. You're looking at town meeting approvals and so on. So I don't think that it boxes you into a use by any means. It's just the engagement and understanding of is this right or not.
I do too. I'll also make a note for whoever's listening. I've noticed that somebody has cleaned out that Oakland Road site. There was a lot of junk and trash and looked like school furniture in there. And I noticed it's hauled out to the corner and it's taken away, so congratulations to someone.
Who owns that? Is that the town or the school?
Yeah.
The town.
The town
It's the town, yeah. Yep, so, and with that, you know, that discussion will ensue, like you said, what's the appropriate level of housing, what if it's deeper affordability and how that affects the market and costs and so on. So it really covers a lot, and we'd look to partner with you guys, Reading Housing Authority, Council on Aging, Select Board, and anybody and everybody that we can to really make it as robust as possible. So,
great.
Great. And of course, if you ever have feedback on that or thoughts, let me know. But I'll draft up an application in the coming weeks, hopefully by summer, and share it with you guys. So MBTA communities, not a huge substantial update just yet, but more kind of where we're at and where we're starting to get to now. So we have partnered with CHAPA, who is a local regional housing advocate, and so they've put us in a grouping of similar communities to kind of plan for and prepare for public engagement related to MBTA communities, and we're grouped based on demographics, potential uses in MBTA community, and I guess like the style of compliance that we're looking at for commuter rail communities and the deadlines and town meeting process. So we're grouped with a lot of similar towns have to go through that similar process. So it's kicking off next week, I think. We had a kickoff with all the groups, but next week is like our first real training that they're gonna kind of share some ideas and concepts around engagement. And on top of that, we've also partnered with what's known as Abundant Housing Mass, who is another third-party nonprofit vendor, local regional, whose aim is to kind of find and develop pro-housing groups in town. So they've charged us with finding what might be like pro-housing or pro-discussion on housing advocates in town to help on when we get to public engagement, like making sure that the right, or I guess additional bodies are there to help on the conversation. So, you know, we're still kind of trying to understand exactly what it is they're asking of us and when, but they seem like a good program that we just want to stay in the loop with, and that they can help, I think, as we get closer to a real engagement plan and dates, that they can really help handle social media blastings, door-to-door, grassroots style movement seems to kind of be their forte, which I love and support, and I think would be a big benefit here to help get people to the conversation. So that's the goal with them. So CHAPA is very like high level, what's your engagement look like? Abundant Housing Mask is like finding the people to get to the engagement. So hopefully with the combination of the two, we can do some real robust forums and engagement. And then on top of that, and I haven't gone through it yet, but we did submit to Mass Housing Program for additional technical assistance. So they sent me a scope of what they might be able to help us with, which could also be help a lead on engagement and facilitate the conversation, but hopefully more specifically also like additional GIS and dimensional control help that we might be seeking during this process. So I have to get through that scope and kind of flush it out and make sure it works. But with those three partners and with our staff, we're very confident that we can start public engagement, certainly this year, most definitely. So Mary and I are planning to sit in the next week or two. We have a lot of data. We have our early technical assistance data. And so I'm sure, as you kind of already know, there's multiple paths forward, which we're hoping to propose to you guys and bring to you like a few options forward. But just about every zoning district in town needs to be amended, or an overlay or something, including TSGD. So, so, we're gonna start building in the next week or two the full public engagement plan, and really starting to plan the forum dates and what these forums are gonna entail, probably starting with what is MBTA communities and why, and that whole shebang, and then getting into like what are our proposals, possible proposals going forward, and where do we feel like Reading can best fit, or what best fits Reading. So we hope to very much take a holistic approach at this and find, I guess, what the intent of this is. There's different ways to do it, but we do hope to help guide conversations of what is the intent and what we found in our housing production plan of the missing middle housing stock. And that's a big change, that's a big topic. So it does take a lot of engagement, education, discussion, hearing concerns, trying to address that, as you all know. So we've been taking baby steps with the data and stuff right now, but it's about to probably start coming to a more full steam ahead approach in conversations. So that's my update there. So nothing.
Andrew, is there a deadline of some sort that we have to have a plan or?
So we submitted an action plan in January that was approved and gave us interim compliance. We do have to take steps to, proving that we're activating that action plan, which I think we're doing so far. Our full deadline is to comply by December 2024. So we have to have zoning approved and intact that complies with MBTA communities by December 2024.
I just read that there's at least one town, I can't remember which, but a western. Holden is doing, I thought I read it was something like Lexington also.
That is opposing?
No, it's taking it to town meeting this spring.
Yeah, there are some.
There are
some. No,
Yeah.
I was going the other way.
Oh, some that have
That are
decided
just
to not
saying
do it at all.
no,
Yeah.
no
Yes.
leaping way or
So,
Yeah. See, I was surprised when you said Holden, but
No.
taking
There are
it to
some,
town meeting
because
already.
there are some that it's actually a pretty easy step.
Yes, yeah.
That they have like a nice parcel
A
that's
nice
like,
big
oh
piece
yeah,
of land.
oh yeah, we'll just do it there.
And I had to wonder for the ones that are going through town meeting now, if that's probably the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would we say in Reading, is it, do they, and I'm not that familiar with how town meetings are organized in Reading, typically, in air, they would not do zoning changes at fall town meeting. It would just be spring town meeting.
Traditionally, it's supposed to be fall town
It's the
meeting
opposite
here,
here.
but we've been doing it in the spring.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that will probably be a question going forward. Like, in my eyes, April 2024 is ideal because then we can get it fully AG. If anything was approved, it gets fully AG approved by August. Now we known compliance. If we wait till November and it doesn't get approved, and now we're in December deadline and we have nothing, then
What do they do if you don't comply?
there's
They'll let the train stop?
there's a few penalties that you can face, both from funding grants and other resources.
It's set up
The
so that you-
latest,
Oh, go ahead.
the AG stepped it up recently because what I mentioned Holden, which is bizarre to me that they're even a MBTA community, right? They're out past Worcester.
Yeah.
But when they just said, no, we're not doing it, the AG's response was like, no. It's not just losing some. Yeah, so they're gonna step, they are gonna
But
step
if
it
you're
up.
off by 2 months or something.
We would hope that they're working with us and we're trying and looking to, but the goal is December.
But I don't think, because we talked about it, was like, is it worth it? Do you just say no?
Right.
You know,
Because
and
originally it was
that's
like,
not
oh,
gonna
you
be
would
an
lose
option.
access to MassWorks grants, and we
Yeah.
asked each other, I was like, well, how much funding do we
Right.
get? And I was
Yeah,
like,
right,
well,
yeah.
what is this funding in the first place?
Yeah. So I will definitely be trying to direct that there is no path to non-compliance. That's not,
And, and I think that it'll, to me, a very interesting question is, and this is another reason to try for the spring, so that we still have November, is if we take it to a town meeting and town meeting amends the guts out of it so that it doesn't actually work, then what do we do? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that will be a tricky part.
It never happened. I've never experienced that.
Yeah, so, yep, it'll be tricky, but we'll get there. And I think, of course, we'll keep you in the loop on all our forum dates, but hopefully we'll be giving you pretty good updates at every meeting.
Let's talk about that though, just briefly, right? If we're talking April 24 and that's a year, which means like when, right, it's at like 2 months before that. So we're talking 10 months now.
Yeah, so
so
it seems far out, but it's not.
It's not. I put it in the category of thinking you've got this, you've got your dissertation, you've got a year to do it, and then suddenly the moment is here and you've got to get it done. It's the time that we need to back up, especially for engagement, especially for partnering. I think it's really interesting to be partnering with an organization that is finding the housing advocates that will help with the engagement on it. That's a lot of steps to get going on quickly.
because you really need to do all that sort of engagement this summer.
It's the hope.
And have like a solid idea come the fall.
Yeah.
Right? How to move it forward.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Godspeed. So that was my 2 updates on those things.
Okay.
The select board update, and I've not given this much thought upon my return today, but they've asked for a CPDC update at one of their May or June hearings. So
it's actually very specific. I believe because somebody wrote May, and I think Andrew, we were looking at May 23rd is the date that steps out of my mind for.
I believe that's correct.
An update to the select board from CPDC, so we could, I'm thinking we can talk about what we've been up to, and it would probably be good to come with a game plan on MBTA communities. That's actually one of the things that's high on my mind. Well, we will meet a couple weeks before that, so we can put that onto I hope we don't have too meaty of an agenda, because we could put topics for that onto that agenda as well.
I'm hoping to plan for a good MBTA communities discussion on at least the schedule and roadmap that we can present. So
Yes, it is May 23rd is the date that I said would do that.
You can always add another meeting. And you probably will need to, because there'll probably be an executive session coming up before.
It's true. It's true. We do have to have things. Yes.
Perhaps plan on the executive session and then to have.
Yeah, we could do that. If we have to get together for an executive session, as long as we're together, we could take maybe a half hour of that. I don't think it's gonna be a long topic.
Yeah, we can start doing, if they're ES only, by Zoom too, if we have to, if that's easier. But anyway, we can chat
And if
about
we
that
push it
then.
out to June, somebody else could be chair and go do it. That's actually why I suggested.
So yeah, we'll give a general update on your 2022 and 2023 and then MBTA communities, I do imagine will be a good discussion on that, as well as any other long-term planning efforts that are to come underway. They might not relate directly to you, but like our net zero kicking off in the summer and other items that we can briefly touch upon because we'd love your input too as they kick off. So yeah, that's that. Just wanted to alert you to that one.
Are we net zero or is that another board?
You're not net zero, no.
We don't have a net zero board, a committee in town. We have a climate committee.
Yeah, so, and, you know, I'm working with them to spearhead this, and not to go too deep into the weeds, but hopefully the intent is, the plan is helping not just municipal improvements on building and facilities and solar feasibility studies and that whole thing, but also zoning recommendations for new development on when they come through, what is appropriate language to help guide to like kind of what we avoided, I guess, last time of like stronger energy efficiency requirements and renewable development. So that will be a large undertaking plan. It's going to take 8 months, 10 months or something with a lot of engagement as well. But there's just a lot of facets to it, and zoning is a part of it. So yeah. Board reorganization.
Is this, when do we, I know we need a secretary, and then at what point do we, I can't remember, is this the meeting where we assign a new chair, or does that happen at the next
So
meeting?
that usually happens in July.
Not until July. Oh, I'd have to push off that update till Okay. Not that I'm anxious or anything, but I completely lost track about when that happens. We do need a secretary, and I know we have, I shouldn't say I know, because we don't know, but I believe there are some interviews happening for other committee members. So we should, I'm hoping, knock on wood, be at a full committee size.
I sent the email to Jackie. I have not heard anything about moving over from associate to full member.
I also think that they may have been holding off on any additional work on that until after the election, so duly noted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Willing to step up. If somebody wants to be an associate member, I will move over.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody want to nominate themselves for secretary for now? Wait, here's what I'm thinking. Go ahead.
I'll nominate myself.
Thank you. I'm also thinking it's like the secretary is sometimes on the incoming chair, and we had Katrina who was beautifully poised to do that, and I'm hoping she'll come back as a housing advocate for why she moved. I'll second that.
All
I
in
guess a
favor?
second. Do we need to do a roll call for that? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote on nominating John as secretary. Pam?
Are there other nominations?
Oh, any other nominations? I'm really doing a terrible job.
You're good.
Any other discussion? Any comments from the audience?
What does the secretary actually do?
Not a lot.
The secretary reads the motions and gets ready to be the next chair traditionally, right?
Or steps in as the chair.
Right, if they're absent.
It's not necessarily keeping minutes.
No, Andrew does that. Andrew and Mary.
That's why I've been
Very
tapping
nice.
over here all evening.
Yeah, but steps in, it's like vice chair.
Yeah,
It really is like that, yeah.
but that's what it's called.
It's not really clerk or anything like that.
So we had a subcommittee or something for the wetlands bylaw, and I was the secretary of that. So
Oh,
right,
this is really easy.
Let me cherry pick you guys for different. You've all been involved in some sort of other thing to date, so.
Okay, we'll do roll call vote. Pam?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Heather, yes. Thank you. Do we wanna do minutes or do we wanna just save them?
Look, and my computer says exactly 11 PM. I think that's like an omen that says time to
Are there any that we have to do for the
11 PM.
executive
Did I say
session?
AM?
No.
Okay.
Okay, but you want to enter executive session, right?
Oh, do we still need to do executive session?
It sounds like Andrew is suggesting that we do executive session.
Okay, so we take a motion.
Is it short?
It is short.
All right.
And you can adjourn directly out of,
Do you have that motion that we always need to read?
sure do.
Let me pass it over to Sean.
Few edits, but hopefully you can read that.
Yeah, get right into service, right? Motion to enter executive session under purpose 3 relative to the litigation involving 459 Main Street because an open session may have a detrimental impact to the litigation position of the public body and to invite Community Development Director Andrew McDinkle and
Senior planner.
Senior Planner Mary Benedetto, right? And to adjourn the meeting at the conclusion of the executive session.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. Second. I'll second.
Do we need to roll call?
Yes.
And we absolutely need a roll
Yes.
call. Pam,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Heather, yes.